Today on AM Live. Manufacturing firms mull over outsourcing to beat coronavirus. President Trump suspends all travel to Europe save for UK. And back home, the Talo Shoka bill is 204 billion shillings to Turkana oil bill justified. Hello, good morning and many thanks indeed for joining us today on AM Live. We, of course, train our focus every Thursday on what is happening in the market. Our guests are already here in studio with us. We shall be training our focus on the blowbacks of coronavirus. Right now, looking globally at what is happening. Also here, there is a report from the Kenya Association of Manufacturers and also KEPSA, who have also taken a baseline survey of the effects of coronavirus in all spheres of our economy. Shall be putting that into perspective with our panelists. And here is our guest profiles. But before we head over to our discussion, let's see what is on the front pages of the dailies today. Fresh off the press, we begin with the Business Daily this morning. This is what is on the front page of the Business Daily. Keroshe risks scary assets seizure over 9 billion shillings bill. Taxman enforcement of unpaid tax includes attachments and coveting property, right? Keroshe Breweries risk having its assets seized after the Kenya Revenue Authority secured victory at the tax tribunal to collect 9.1 billion shillings from the troubled brewer. The taxman yesterday announced that it had won an appeal filed before the Tax Appeal Tribunal in 2015 and 2017 by Keroshe, allowing it to proceed with the collection of the outstanding taxes. The story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Also, Treasury cuts traders' debt by 133 billion shillings to save SMEs from auction. The Treasury yesterday announced it had reduced pending bills by nearly 90%, offering relief to suppliers and contractors that have been the target of auctioneers. Treasury Secretary Ukur Yatani said the pending bills had dropped from 152 billion shillings to 18.71 billion shillings over the past 18 months in a speedy payment scheme aimed at improving the fortunes of small businesses and easing a cash crunch across all sectors. This story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Each for equal. This is all about gender parity, and we can see NMG Editorial Administration Manager Catherine Wanyama, NMG Senior HR Manager Jen Mwirore, Karen Hospital CEO Betty Gikonyo, Aga Khan University Academic Affairs Director Nancy Booker, also Absa Bank Head of Finance, Diversity and Inclusion Carol Wambugu, and Daily Nation's Gender Editor Dorcas Muga showing equal sign during the NMG International Women's Day celebration at Sarova Stanley Hotel yesterday. The story continues on page 2 of the Daily Nation today. Coop Bank rescue Jamii Bora in buyout is another story you need to follow also inside the Business Daily today. Cooperative Bank of Kenya has proposed to fully acquire Jamii Bora Bank, offering a lifeline to the troubled small-tier lender that was also the target of CBA Bank. Central Bank of Kenya saying the proposed transaction, which requires regulatory approvals and whose details were not disclosed, will diversify the business models of the two institutions and enhance stability of the Kenyan banking sector. That story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily. On the ticker, let's see what we have there. 3 counties fit to borrow from NSC. Makueni, Kisumu and Bungoma counties have been adjudged fit to borrow from the Nairobi Security Exchange and external markets, opening a new funding window for the projects. That is a story that you want to follow inside the Business Daily on page 5 today. Today's digit is 1.9 billion shillings. That is funds from World Bank, African Development Bank for locust fighting. You can follow the story on page 5 of the Business Daily. And Ministry seeks to scrap KBC debt. The Ministry of ICT is seeking Cabinet's approval to write off a Treasury-backed loan to Kenya Broadcasting Corporation, estimated at more than 40 billion shillings. That is a story that you want to follow also inside the Business Daily this morning. Just to zoom out for you to see clearly how it looks. This is how it looks. Also inside, land crackdown, anxiety and repossession of grabbed public land gains team is another story that you want to follow inside the Business Daily this morning. Right, let me show you what we have on the front page of the Daily Nation today. Going for the kill is what we have on the front page of the Daily Nation today. Going for the kill. Tanga threatens Uhuru with Ndungu report calling for its implementation before any constitutional changes. Also, Raila mobilizes 70 MPs to demand Ruto's resignation, saying his 2022 ambitions had clouded execution of role. And also, DP allies dare president to call fresh elections and see dust because they claim they have up to 80% of Kenyans. And on top there, the flagger reads, after circling each other for months like sharks, Jubilee rivals go for the throat. And that is a battle. All that story is tucked away on page 6 of the Daily Nation. You can see also related pictures there of the two camps, some of MPs and senators allied to Deputy President William Ruto. At a press conference at Parliament yesterday, they dared President Uhuru Kenyatta to dissolve Parliament and call fresh elections. Also, poison survived, then died in plane crash. Poisoned, survived, then died in plane crash. Professor George Saitoti trusted very few people and naively thought that because of this, he was safe. He wasn't. On the afternoon of February 13th, 1990, he was poisoned at a popular restaurant elsewhere. The previous night, his cabinet colleague Robert Ouko had been murdered. Follow this story on page 4 and 5, a continuation of the poison chalice of the vice presidency. Curse of vice presidency continues today inside the Daily Nation, page 4 and 5. Also, family can't bury boy over 13 million shillings. Family can't bury a boy over 13 million shillings. That is another story that you want to follow inside the Daily Nation today. Brian Njoroge's body lies at Gertrude's Children's Hospital because his family cannot raise 13 million shillings bill. This story continues on page 7 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's move on swiftly and we'll see what we have on the front page of the Standard. All-out war is a splash. All-out war. Ultimate showdown is what the sub-headline reads here. Battle lines drawn as MPs alert President and Raila challenged Deputy President to resign for undermining head of state. They lay out charges against DP, pointing to looming impeachment. Ruto's camp accuses Raila of plotting his downfall so that he can join government. This story continues on page 6 and 7 of the Standard this morning. And see also how they came out in force from Parliament yesterday. Gatundu South MP Moses Kuria addressing the media at Parliament buildings flanked by MPs allied to Deputy President William Ruto yesterday. They dismissed calls for Ruto to resign. All-out war is a splash. And on top here also you can see the other camp as well. This is Baringo woman representative Gladwell Cheriot was reading a statement yesterday on behalf of pro-handshake MPs asking Deputy President William Ruto to resign. That is the Standard. That is how it looks. Let's see what we have on the front page of the Star. And this is what you're waking up to on the front page of the Star this morning. Ruto MPs, it says, we dare you to impeach DP. We dare you to impeach DP. Falling out. Tanga claims DP is being mistreated. Ask President to give Raila CS job. Also, pro-Uhuru legislators list for possible impeachment offences. Ask DP to resign or be forced out. The story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning, and you can see the different camps also, the related pictures on the front page of the Star this morning. Ruto MPs during a press conference outside Parliament buildings in Nairobi yesterday. This is the Star for you. Let's see what we have on the front page of the People Daily. And this is what you're waking up to on the front page of the People Daily. Quickly, we head over to the splash. MPs squared out over Ruto is a splash today. Politicians alert to Uhuru and Raila ask DP to quit for disrespecting president. But rival group says their man is not a visitor in government and their rivals to bring on motion of impeachment. This story continues on page 2 of the People Daily today. You can see related pictures as well on the front page of the People Daily. Also, coronavirus. Kenya won't evacuate stranded students from China, declares health CS. This is the latest development. Kenya won't evacuate stranded students from China, declares health CS. You can follow the story on page 8, Newsbeat, inside the People Daily today. Also, how poster bosses trapped staff in loan scam. How poster bosses trapped staff in loan scam. You can follow the story on page 4 of the People Daily. Below, as tribunal orders Kiroshe to pay KRA 9 billion shillings. That is also inside the Newsbeat on page 16 of the People Daily this morning. Let's see how the Taifa Leo fared as far as the splash is concerned. And this is what you're waking up to on the front page of Taifa Leo this morning. Uhuru agawa kazi za Ruto. It says Uhuru agawa kazi za Ruto, aachwa kuhudhuria harambee pekee baada ya majukumu yake kupewa Matiang'i na Raila. That is a splash today, and you can follow the story on page 2. Also, wabunge wa Uhuru Raila waanza kampeni ya kumng'oa naibu rais. You can follow that story also on page 2 of Taifa Leo this morning. This is how it looks. And corona, wachezaji wa Arsenal watengwa. That story also is tucked away on page 2 of Taifa Leo. Let's move on. We see what we have on the front page. I showed you the Business Daily. Now we can cross over now to Tanzania. We see what is the splash on the front page of the Citizen today. Where your money will go in government's next budget. The government provisionally sets the 2020-2021 budget at 38.88 trillion shillings, with industrialization, infrastructure, and social services being some of the priority areas. The story continues on page 2 of the Citizen today. How budget has risen in recent years also is shown here from 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2020-2021. It has risen exponentially to 34.88 trillion shillings. And this is what Dr. Philip Mpango, Finance and Planning Minister, is saying, quote unquote. It should be remembered that this is the last budget for the implementing the ruling party CCM's 2015 manifesto. So It will continue with poverty reduction efforts, reducing unemployment, stepping up the fight against corruption, and maintaining peace and security. That story all tucked away inside the Citizen on page 2. Also, 30 Nordic farms skip DAR forum over virus concerns. Some 30 companies from the Nordic countries have decided that they will not attend a business forum kicking off in Dar es Salaam today. This is for fear of the fast becoming notorious coronavirus spread across the world. You can follow the story on page 2 of the Citizen, and this is a blowback of it, also how it is affecting the conference tourism as well around the world. Coronavirus urgent public health notice also is given here. If you have fever and you're coughing, seek medical care early. Stay home if you feel unwell. If you have a fever, cough and difficulty in breathing, seek medical attention. Immediately follow the directions of your local health authority. You can follow this inside also the Citizen this morning. Let's see how also the Mwananchi is faring as well. Bajeti ya uchaguzi, that is a splash. And you can follow the story also on page 2 or page 4 and 5 for Mwananchi in Tanzania. Let's go to Uganda. Daily Monitor is up, and this is your splash this morning. How coronavirus has hit Uganda's tourism is a splash. World Health Organization declares the seized pandemic, and the government restricts 9 more countries. How virus has wreaked havoc worldwide. You can follow this story on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Monitor. And suspect in Sheikh Mutumba murder pleads guilty. You can see a standalone picture here, and the story continues on. By giving the page there inside the Daily Monitor. MTN agrees to pay 370 billion shillings for new license. No pay rise for public servants in 2021. This is what the government is saying. And this is how the Daily Monitor in Uganda looks. Make sure you grab a copy for yourself. Also, judiciary granted power to control on budget is the latest development in Uganda. We cross over now to Rwanda, see what the New Times is holding for us. Horticulture farmers decry market wars is a splash in Rwanda there. All the details tucked away on page 5. And National Irrigation Scheme boost farmers' yields. This is a story that you want to follow inside the New Times in Rwanda. We can see President Paul Kagame during the inauguration of the National Solar-Powered Irrigation Project in Kirehe District on Wednesday. The president is also flanked by American philanthropist, that is Howard Buffett, Agriculture and Animal Resource Minister Geraldine Mukeshimana, and Eastern Province Governor Fred Mufulukye. The Howard Graham Buffett Foundation backed, that is $39 million. Project is already having a significant impact on the productivity of farmers in the area. The story continues on page 4 of the New Times today. Right, let's move on. We see what we have inside also the magazines that we have for you as well. If you've not really grabbed your latest copy of the Nairobi Law Monthly and Nairobi Business Monthly, I will show you that much later after the Wall Street Journal. I've just seen it. I'll be remiss if I don't show you what also is happening as far as the global markets are concerned. Stocks saw a rising chunk of loss. Remember, this actually is yesterday's development. It says in turbulent day, share jumps to Bell, I should say, retreat and bounce back in last hour. But this has also plunged with the latest announcement from Donald Trump about him banning travel to Europe, save for the UK. So this has also taken a tank as it is right now. But also, tax deadline hit by virus is another story. And we can see here President Xi Jinping, who visited Wuhan on Tuesday, the city at the center of the coronavirus. China's hardline slows outbreak. Authorities ignored global norms for responding to epidemics. Other countries weigh tactics. That is a story that you want to follow also inside the Wall Street Journal. Of course, time zones notwithstanding, this will be our latest. Efforts intensify to curb infections is another story that you want to follow also inside the Wall Street Journal today. Let's move on. We see what we have, as I promised, inside the latest copies of the Nairobi Law Monthly. Also, we have Forbes Africa for you. If you've not grabbed your copy as well, you can do so. This is the latest copy, Africa Forbes, featuring Grasa Marshall. People say I am powerful, but I care more about being impactful. And we have a list inside here. Africa's 50 most powerful women are listed inside the Forbes magazine. And I mentioned also yesterday that Lupita Nyong'o and also Dr. Jennifer Riria, they've been listed as some of the most powerful women in Africa. So you can grab a copy for yourself as well. Let's move on and see what we have on the front page of the Nairobi Law Monthly quickly. Then we buckle down to a discussion with the panelists who are already here. And this is how it looks for you. Not really this one, just a moment. I'm trying to get the latest copy. Nairobi Law Monthly. Okay, this is what is coming up. Why you should invest in an education plan. This is the Nairobi Business Monthly for you. Why you should invest in an education plan. Options, factors that come into play, and assets allocation strategies fund managers employ when putting funds in education investment plans. This is a story you can follow in the latest copy of the Nairobi Law Monthly. Okay, let me try and see if I can grab a copy of that is the Nairobi Business Monthly. If I have a copy of the Nairobi Law Monthly, it seems that is eluding me, but I can actually just show you also the latest copy of the Entrepreneur. This is the latest copy of the Entrepreneur, the Middle East version, and it says Flying High, JT Partners founder. This is Joe Tubbett. Lessons on taking the leap into entrepreneurship from someone who did exactly that. And the rest, you can grab a copy for yourself if you are very keen on what is happening there. Oops, jumped over to other pages, but this is how it looks for you. Make sure you grab a copy for yourself. All right, laughter and levity is up next. Let's see what our editorial cartoonists have for us this morning. All right, we begin with what we have inside the People Daily. There we go. This is how also the 2020 Tokyo Olympics is being affected by coronavirus, right? The tech is on, and they've been bullish about this, that yes, the Olympics will still go on, despite the fact that there is that threat from coronavirus. This is what Stano has drawn for us inside the People Daily. Let's move on and we see what we have inside the Standard. And this is what has been drawn by Stano, remembering the photojournalist there, Mohinder Dillon, the last perfect shot, 1931-2020, who passed on recently. And this is in tribute to Mohinder. This is what has been drawn by Gado inside the Standard today. So deepest condolences and also sincere sympathy for the family here from our Nation Media Group as well. Let's see what we have inside the Star. According to Ozon, they're trying to retrieve also Victor's editorial cartoon, and this is what he's drawn for us today. And it's all about that particular debate of the Deputy President resigning. This is the maze. How will it pan out exactly? That is a probing question. So some are claiming they have the numbers. Some are daring the president or the people to impeach Deputy President William Ruto. But that is what now has been captured by Ozon. It is quite a maze. The writing is on the wall. I'll leave it for you to decipher this. Also, Victor has drawn for us this particular editorial cartoon today inside the Daily Nation on page 12. We are taking COVID-19 very, very seriously. Hakuna matata. This is the rare white giraffe killed as well. That is a paper which is being swept away. We are taking COVID-19 very seriously. Hakuna Matata. But we shall look at some of the bugbears that are coming to bear right now as far as coronavirus is concerned. So those are your dailies. Make sure you grab a copy of the Daily Nation. I will hack you back into history a bit and also show you how the Daily Nation looked then. That is on Tuesday, 1963. Stop this violence for Kenya's sake. That was a splash then. And Somali's debate breach with UK, that was another story as well. This is how it looked then. And it was actually going for a paltry 30 cents in 1963, the Daily Nation. The truth. So make sure you grab a copy for yourself today. Right. So we want to buckle down to a discussion. And some Kenyan firms are opting to shift part of their manufacturing abroad in efforts to avoid virus disruption, as industry update shows, raising fears of job cuts as local production chains shorten. The labor-intensive industry relies on its value chains to keep thousands of people in jobs, with official data indicating that manufacturers had a total, of 300,000 workers by end of December. Findings of a survey by the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, the sector lobby, suggest 3 in 100 firms have outsourced some of the production processes as part of mitigating measures to ease inputs cost pressures. The lockdown in China has pushed up costs of raw materials and inputs as Kenyan firms turn to alternative markets, according to the Kenya Association Manufacturers Survey on 46 members. 2.8% of about 87 of the manufacturers surveyed are expected to exposed, to shortage of raw materials due to reduced supply from China, while 47% said they are worried about inflated logistical costs because of increased lead time in sourcing from alternative markets. Industry and Trade Ministry on Wednesday, that is yesterday, led talks with industry captains and CAM to assess the impact of disruption in supply of materials from China on domestic factories and find ways to ease cost pressures as a result of reduced supplies. This was the second time the ministry was meeting manufacturers over effects of coronavirus after initial talks last week with indications of weekly meetings going forward. Business leaders have asked for targeted incentives such as tax breaks to help domestic factories utilize dormant capacity to fill the void created by cut-off of some suppliers, from China. That is a story we want to drill deeper and get granular with our panelists who are already here in studio. I will walk over to the other side of the studio to just engage them this morning. As you saw, if you joined the show at the top of the hour, you saw us also running you by the profiles of our panelists. We have Patrick Obath, with us. We have also Sanchen Goodcare, we have Dr. Collins Odote, we have also Dr. Habil Olaka, and also Dr. Gituro Wanaina. So you know the drill. You can hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle. AM Live NTV is our profile name on Facebook, and 20686 our SMS portal. Right, let's just begin with the Kenya Association of Manufacturers from that particular note. First of all, we can see also Donald Trump is announcing that, yes, we'll come also with economic stimulus package in light of the coronavirus. Is this the same line and trajectory that also the Kenya Association of Manufacturers is taking? Kindly just paint a picture for us how it is.
Okay, it's obviously a subject that is evolving and changing. I would say it's a bit like the virus. It's mutating very, very quickly. And the way the business dynamics are changing, businesses just need to be alert, and obviously consumers need to be alert as well. So I think let's separate 2-3 things. Number one, what is the impact of the coronavirus on supply chains and on availability of raw materials, etc., for manufacturers. So what is happening is that the Chinese supplies have started resuming.
Yes.
there have been some delays occasioned by the shutdown, but China's pretty much back into full production now. The only issue is due to the shortage of shipping containers into China, the freight rates have increased. So typically a freight rate for a 20-foot container from China would be about $1,300. That's now increased to $2,200. So input costs will go up slightly. The good news is China's back in full production for raw materials, particularly things that Kenya uses like fabric and steel, iron ore billets. The second area that needs to be looked at is, if China shuts down, where's your alternative supply base? So people have been looking outside and trying to get a plan B into action, because last year it was all about China versus US trade war. This year it's about the coronavirus. So basically, is China now a suitable supply chain destination? So I think people will look at diversifying their supply chains. The third impact is from the Saudi Arabian-led push to increase oil supplies, which has brought the price of oil down. Kenya being obviously a net importer and with a fuel bill amounting to almost 600 billion shillings annually, this is a good opportunity for Kenya in terms of reduction in input costs on the from the oil. So when we've been buying oil at about $68 a barrel, and it's now fallen to about $36, $35 a barrel.
Yes.
It's a great opportunity for Kenya to capitalize on this, buy some futures, lock in this pricing, because eventually this virus will go, the economy will go back to where it should be, and I feel Kenya as a country should capitalize on this, and we'll get lower fuel costs, lower input costs and things. The only issue on that is the petrochemical industry that is reliant upon this. Some of it, producers like Sasol in South Africa,
yes,
SABIC and Aramco in Saudi Arabia, which are big input manufacturers, will either shut down and ride through this storm for 3 months and flout long-term agreements with manufacturers. So we may see supply chain pressures on petrochemical-led inputs into the country.
Mm-hmm. Right, thank you. Let's just rope in also Patrick Obath. You think them really towing the idea of outsourcing some of its production is the way to go in combating the effects of coronavirus?
I think that is a very it's a thought, but I think it's a very low likelihood. Shifting manufacturing very quickly out of a place is a huge decision that any manufacturer has to take. And I mean, even the sort of the portable manufacturing facilities like textiles, which you can shift very quickly. The sheer logistics of shifting is actually very daunting. Mm-hmm. So I think whilst the thought of that is there, that is more of a long-term contingency plan rather than an immediate plan.
Absolutely.
So I don't see any manufacturing moving out of this country at all. Yeah. All that will happen is that there are various scenarios that people look at, your supply chain, you look at your internal costs, you look at your export markets, you look at all those kind of stuff, and you begin to sort of weigh what it is that you have to do in order to ride through this tide. And I think what is happening globally, that you're seeing most governments are doing, basically they're putting support measures for their own internal manufacturing capacity, so that those industries can survive through this period. So you're looking at the US, where tax breaks are being put in most countries, tax breaks are being put in. And I think that's the one big thing that any government can do, is basically to drop in tax breaks for the period that this is happening, so that the industries can basically lower their cost base and be able to supply their own countries. But so manufacturing flight, I don't think so.
So that is a long-term plan.
I agree with Patrick.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think we're going to see many people moving production outside. It's very difficult to do. And it's absolutely a long-term and I would say a very unlikely step. I do agree with Patrick that what are the options? I think banks, with their risk management practices, will start to focus on to what are the risks in place in the hospitality industry and general other industries, and what their exposure is. But banks shouldn't pull the rug from what we call a black swan event like coronavirus on companies. The second thing that should come into play is obviously tax breaks is an option, or a fiscal stimulus. We know how fiscally constrained we are in this economy at the moment. So that's a tough step to take. However, tax breaks, or possibly even a delay in what China's done in terms of just filing your tax returns, just doing it late, and that kind of thing. So there are various measures available.
Oh, okay. So maybe we can also rope in Dr. Gituro and Aina, because when we saw this, we were wondering, okay, now we're actually facing the blowbacks of it, that also the job market is going to be affected, because if they take production or we have a manufacturing flight out of the country, then it means that is also affecting the job market, as it were. But it's good to know that still this is a long-term measure that is in the pipeline.
It's unlikely.
Right. Let's just hear from Dr. Gituro briefly.
Thank you, Ivan, for inviting. And I think we agreed last week that you should give us masks. What are the masks?
Oh, masks.
That's what you had agreed.
But how will we hear you?
Nonetheless, I think it's perhaps looking from a different perspective. I think it's an opportunity having this coronavirus. And I think yesterday was an interesting person who was making a comment. It has drastically reduced the travel, particularly per DMs. In one or other.
So in a way, it's affecting the austerity measures the government have been saying, actually, to instill.
In a direct way. But I think what is important, perhaps, Patrick, it's how do we cushion ourselves?
Yeah.
I think that's the key word. I have read the report from KM and KEPSA. I think some of the suggestion could be modified. And I think we need to take cue from what the UK did on Tuesday. Something they have never done in history, reducing their interest rates to about 0.25. That's amazing. You know, with 2.5, who can't borrow? The second one is perhaps what Italy did. Italy has suspended any repayment of loans within this period because there's not much activity. So those are the areas I think we should be looking at. How do we cushion ourselves? And I think I like what you're talking about, tax break or fiscal stimulus. We have talked in this forum about the stimulus, economic stimulus. This perhaps is an opportunity. I think there is also to look at the interest rates. I'm worried about the bank, and Patrick is a chair of one of the banks. I think the banks in this country have difficulties bringing the interest down. I don't know how that we can do, but that's where the government comes in terms of it. But also opportunities. Yesterday I was listening to a conference which was to take off in the UK, and now they are using the video conferencing. That's the thing, perhaps we can just Skype. But I think there are more opportunities when you look in terms of this, what is happening. And it's for us to leverage on that. It's an opportunity now to be producing locally. I think that's important. Maybe the flip side of all this, there's no country which has an opportunity, as we talk, advantage the other countries, because it affects everyone.
Yeah.
So it's not just Kenya which is affected, it's everybody in the world which is affected. So in a way that balances us. But yesterday was a very interesting, I think on Tuesday, very interesting news from China that their prime actually visited the Wuhan province, showing the confidence that it's really come. And I think I like my friend from KAM, the chairman, that you can see the production is started coming in from China. But I think it's also an opportunity to be less dependent on one supplier.
Agreed.
Yeah, the way we have so much dependent on China, it should make us start thinking. And I think there's an opportunity to talk to our local manufacturers. When you talk to Babadogo, the textile apparel there, how can we do that? We export to the US, we export whatever. This is something we can do within this country. So, of course, there are areas, my friend Patrick, I saw him on last week, smiling all the way that the Gulf is taking off. Unfortunately, it hasn't. I hope it's a matter of time. But it really has affected everyone.
It has an effect. Of course, Patrick was very busy also last week preparing for the Barclays Open as well. But that has been suspended. Sports has been also adversely affected. Right.
But I wanted to say something here. I think we must step back and give government they have done a fantastic job. I think forming that task force, the president talking about it. I think Collins last week was saying we reduce on BBI. I think it's one of the things coming from the reports. I think as much as possible, and we are lucky that we haven't had any case here with our connectivity. So it's probably an opportunity to see how we can actually minimize the big groups or large clouds coming together.
Right, thank you. So those are some of the effects, but you've mentioned about also other, I think it's the UK, Italy also has staggered mortgage repayment. I don't know how the banks also in this country are actually prepared in case we just have an outbreak here in the country, how will it also affect people who have borrowed so far? Because I think there will be stand measures as far as working is concerned. This is going to affect the economy. How are we prepared as bankers? Just looking at the financial sector, talking about rates as well.
Thank you, Labal. I think one of the things is the fact that what you can see globally happening is that there have been a number of different policy responses from a number of other jurisdictions, starting with the US, where the Fed moved to reduce the Fed rate to cut it by some margin. You've talked about the Bank of England moving in the same direction, where they are reducing their
right.
Their
I'm sorry to butt in. I think I'll try and rectify your mic. We can't hear you, right? Okay. I'll just walk over there and see if there is any trouble with that. But in the meantime, let's hear from Dr. Collins.
It's been affected by coronavirus.
It's been affected.
Then I should move.
We should move from here. You've taken the 1 meter distance between us, so you're okay.
Right, Collins.
Dibal, I think on the first 3 weeks ago, when this thing happened, we were having the debate between the health implications and the economic implications. And some of us in the show were saying it's going to affect both. Others are saying no. I think 3 weeks later, and I agree with Wainaina, I think government has done a very commendable job, especially on dealing with the health implications. I think CS Mutai could not have come to the ministry at a better time. To watch over the last 1 week about the activation of the SMS system, despite the glitch yesterday when somebody tried to use the hotline, it wasn't working. I think that's a small hitch. The fact that it's activated, I think, is fantastic. Number two, the fact that it's even had meetings with the matatu industry to say what they can do. The fact that last week, Friday, there was an announcement that any meetings of people, international meetings of people around 15 people will not take place. The fact that even yesterday the CS was asking politicians, if you must continue going on with the BBI rally, before you start with the divisive issues, please educate people. I think there's huge amount of work being done. Having said so, I think the focus of the conversations today is we need to now pay much more attention on the economic implications. We've done a good job on the health implications. We need to realize the economic implications. And both CAM and KEPSA have carried out a study which is showing the business implications. And what I like, especially the KEPSA report, because of the many opportunities that it talks about. So it's not just a danger, it's the opportunities too. I don't think that the sentiments about moving manufacturing out of this country is something we should focus on too much. It's a nice thing to say in the report, just to show a potential danger. I think if you are to move, where are you moving to?
Correct.
Because this is not something that's affecting Kenya and China. This thing is mutating. In fact, now the focus on Italy is much more than even China. So I think what we need to be dealing with much more is responsiveness. How do we take care of both the opportunities? How do we deal with the business impacts? I think there are several things that government could start thinking about. Number one, if you look at the hospitality industry, I think it's hugely hit. Hotels are at almost 10%. If you look at the airline industry, they're hugely hit. What can we do in the short term to ensure that these businesses don't close down? Because when they do, Kenyans suffer. What kind of incentives? So this is the time for thinking about what kind of economic stimulus packages can we put in place for the short term. We have an opportunity in the budget, because this is a time for budgeting. Let's not just put in monies for addressing the health implications. Let's start asking ourselves, how do we cushion our business? Because that's the only way that the good work that CS Mutai is doing will be complemented by stabilizing the economy, which is the other negative impact that this virus is going to cause.
Right. Let's get back to Dr. Habil Olaka.
Yeah, I was just trying to explain the fact that globally we have seen a number of jurisdictions coming up with a number of policy measures, and I mentioned the fact that the US have cut the Fed rate, the Bank of England have equally gone the same route, reduced the policy rate, and one unique thing about those markets is that the inflation rate, for example, is very low, almost tinkering on the negative side. Now, could the same policy measures apply in our environment? Maybe not, because of the fact that one of the possible impacts of the coronavirus in the market is the fact that there will be shortages, and therefore we'll start seeing pressures, inflation pressures, beginning to come in. And therefore, using the central bank rate to bring it down may not be quite the right policy response to that kind of problem. Now, the other option, of course, is, as you have mentioned, on the fiscal side,
yes,
trying to bring in tax breaks and all those options. But we also know of the fact that the National Treasury team is on a serious fiscal consolidation stance, where they're trying to address the fiscal deficit. And therefore, they're trying to reduce the expenditure, trying to look for additional opportunities for revenue enhancement. And therefore, in that kind of an environment, trying to come in with a fiscal stimulus, it's one of the possible responses, but they have got they're coming from a very difficult background to be able to achieve that. So I think as we look at the possible policy responses, we need to be aware of the fact that there are quite some difficult environment that they're operating from to be able to address some of those. Now, coming back to what you mentioned about the banks and how banks are going to respond to this. Of course, banks are also aware of the fact that there are two things. One is we are coming from an era where we had a very difficult environment of rate caps. And right now we're trying to move from that and take advantage of the environment to be able to increase our credit flow out to the market to support the economic pickup. And with the coronavirus coming in and therefore affecting the demand, I think we might see challenges of us being able to come out of that quickly. So we might see the delayed resumption of credit uptake. That's on one. Then the other one, which has also been alluded to, is the fact that a number of the borrowers look at the tourism sector, where obviously the projection in terms of performance may not be very good in view of what's happening to traveling. Manufacturers are already having challenges, and therefore we'll see the quality of our loan book beginning to exert pressure in terms of the non-performing portfolio. Now, with that in mind, I think banks will still be willing to support the borrowing community in terms of trying to support them within this period, just to get over the cliff. So I think the right approach would be to the specific entities that have been specifically affected, I think have early discussions with your bank to alert them to the fact that you might be foreseeing these kind of challenges, and therefore you are proposing some form of accommodation within this short period as the impact of the virus begins to impact your business, and with a clear plan of how you intend to accommodate yourself within this period when you've got those challenges. Yeah.
Right, Patrick, but how is this entirely going to affect also the realization of Big Four agenda, especially for the manufacturing sector?
I think the Big Four agenda is still on the trajectory of takeoff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done to actually begin to sort of see that happening. And I think this is it's a short-term glitch in the overall picture of the Big Four agenda. All it will delay, it may delay the start, it may delay the pickup, but I don't think it's actually going to stop it. Because if you look at the agricultural sector, for example, what are the key inputs that you require in the agricultural sector? Fertilizers are the key things. Seeds, which are done locally. Fertilizers is probably the area of impact that you might have, because most fertilizers come from petrochemicals. But to say that, the petrochemical industry globally may actually see a flip up because of the reduction in the cost of crude. And that means that the cost of fertilizers, everything else is going to be cheaper. But then the challenges on the sort of the logistics may basically keep the price suppressed for a bit. So if you're talking about agriculture, I think it is all about people in Kenya, and it's all self-contained internally. So that should take off. There's no issue at all. Manufacturing follows agriculture, because if you're talking about the big four, that was actually going to follow on some of the inputs in the country. So it's actually part of a full value chain. So long as agriculture takes off, what will happen is that the idle capacity we have in the country will then pick up the production and move on. So what then happens now is, if we can take advantage of the fact that globally the supply chains are not working, and ramp up production in Kenya in terms of agriculture, use as much water as we can at the moment to sort of start doing irrigation, and then get it to the manufacturing sector, you will see that import substitution, which is one of the key things of the big four, will begin to happen. And I think that's a key thing. So right now we can take advantage of this virus and begin to implement the big four. I think it's the other way around. It's an opportunity, right? The others are healthcare, and healthcare basically is again an internal thing. We have to organize ourselves. The biggest impact on healthcare is going to be the issue of pharmaceuticals, because most of that comes from China, a lot of the pharmaceuticals. And so we may find that even once you try and improve healthcare, the actual, the curative side may suffer because of that. And again, we have local manufacturers of pharmaceuticals. The challenge is raw materials and the supply of raw materials. But that again, if with the depressed prices of fuel, of crude, which are going to play out for a bit longer, I think, than the impact of the coronavirus, because it's a multifaceted thing. The crude price is, we've seen the China OPEC, the Russia OPEC impact. But beyond that is basically the rest of the world versus the US in terms of fracking and shale. And that's sort of the geopolitics around that. And you're going to find that the rest of the world versus fracking in the US is going to play out a bit longer than the fight between Russia and OPEC. So in terms of the pharmaceuticals, if we get it right again and begin to manufacture locally, and wait for the stimulus of low cost of inputs that will probably play out with the low cost of crude, then again you're going to begin to implement the big four agenda using the coronavirus as a stimulus. I mean, it's almost like looking at it from the other side. But I think now that we are locked in as a country, it's a great opportunity to actually use to sort of get the big four going. And the other thing I was going to talk about in terms of this lockdown, people are complaining about there's going to be people out of work and so forth and so on. Why don't we use what I call the idle population, if it does come up, to do other things like clean up the cities, or do something that normally we are too busy not to do, right? There are people available now, and if we think differently and begin to sort of look at the opportunities that this slowdown can give to the economy and to the country in terms of changing the culture, we could do a lot of things with the idle capacity of the human capital that is going to come up, right? I mean, if Kenya Airways has gone down in terms of the number of flights they're doing, what are the pilots doing? Can we use them differently, not as Kenya Airways, but as Kenya, right? If manufacturing is slowing down in certain sectors, whatever, what can we do with that idle capacity? Can we turn that idle capacity of human resource into something different? I think we need to take advantage of this period that we're going to have of lockdown to do things differently in the country. And that might just begin to have a culture change in the way we think.
And so we have a twin challenge right now, as it is. You're mentioning also the oil prices getting affected because of this tug of war between Russia and the Saudi Arabia as well. So there are bugbears and fears as well that the prices could even go as low as $20 a barrel.
That's going to happen. It's not as though it's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think that's like catching a falling knife.
Yeah.
With stock markets and oil prices. I think, however, Kenya is well positioned.
Is well positioned,
particularly with lower crude prices, being an importer of fuel. So, I think we should see opportunities there. Secondly, I agree with Patrick that how do we calibrate our economy to cushion ourselves from these external shocks, and what do we need to make our economy resilient and continue investment in manufacturing so that we serve not only our country but regional neighbors as well. So I think it is an opportunity, and we should do it. There will be some short-term impact on some markets which may shut down. So, for example, even I think non-food retail and so on in Italy is now being closed down. The issue is within Western Europe, which is a key export market for Kenya. If that continues, what's going to happen to our flowers and veg and so on? Although more and more people are going to eat in because of social distancing, which is taking place now, it also presents an opportunity for our veg exports to increase. So I believe we are well positioned. There will be some sectors which will have an issue, but overall in the medium term, I feel we'll be in a better place. Yeah.
Right. Some sectors will have some issues as well. Also, Dr. Collins Odote mentioned about the survey done by the KEPSA Foundation. When we circle back, we want to look keenly on this particular survey also as we try and drill deeper on the impact of coronavirus in the manufacturing sector and of course, the economy in its entirety as well. So remember, you can hit us on Twitter as always. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle, AM Live NTV, or profile name on Facebook, and 20686, our SMS portal. Also, remember to follow me at Dibaline. Yeah? Don't go away. We'll circle back with more.
Africanacity is old tech creating new tech by upcycling e-waste into 3D printers. At ABSA, we love Africanacity.
What would you like to become when you grow up?
As a refugee, you have to improve yourself first.
A doctor. Clap for the doctor.
The most important thing that I've come to know in the camp is education.
We are focusing on empowering them with the knowledge.
When I don't school, how will I get a job? There are a lot of gaps where we actually need more funding so that the books, the school uniform, the ratio of students per classroom or the ratio of students per teacher can be improved.
Na wewe unamjuaje?
I was his fiance.
Chika Storo kibao na 200% Storo bonus. Piga simu zaidi, tuma SMS au nunua bundles ufikishe target yako leo. Isitoshe, pata 50% extra airtime unapo top up na kupiga *544*2* amount hash. Safaricom, for you.
Buddha, unakaa fresh kama umeukambani jo.
Ever since Brayo alanduku umekuwa desperate. Kama umerudia wizi, itabidi basi umeachana na sera.
Operator present.
3 days ago, I was robbed this watch.
Imeandikwa PB na maanisha nini?
Paris Baraza.
You are mine, and that will never change. Never.
When you're facing stubborn stains, you're always in a fierce fight. Clean Soft kicks out stains. Kimateki.
Discover the all-new Nivea Nourishing Cocoa Lotion, specially formulated with Nivea's Deep Moisture Serum and Africa's natural cocoa for 48-hour deep moisture. Glowing, radiant skin with nourishing cocoa lotion from Nivea. Get 48-hour deep moisture from the new range of Nivea body lotions.
Welcome back. You're watching In the Market here on AM Live. We continue with the conversation apace with the panelists on the effect of coronavirus on our economy. And we're turning our focus particularly on the manufacturing sector as it is right now. And there was a report that was released by KEPSA that we want us to get granular with. Earlier on, I told you about this report, and I think also Dr. Collins Odote mentioned it. Here it is, if my director may just speak. This is a business perspectives on the impact of coronavirus, COVID-19 on Kenya's economy. Just to flip there, we'll just go quickly. I don't know, most of us, we've gone through this particular report, and they say KEPSA conducted this survey to understand the projected impact of COVID-19 on the economy and across different business sectors. And this is a follow-up from the Executive Order number 2 of 2020 issued by President Uhuru Kenyatta, providing a platform for business to engage with the Ministry of Trade and other offices in government on survey results and work on mitigation measures where government is involved for the sectors affected as well as for future mitigation measures. A total of 127 business participated in the survey, drawn from 17 sectors, and you can see the impact also as it is right now of the coronavirus worldwide. 0 reported cases within EAC, 95 reported cases in 9 African countries, Egypt 55, Algeria 20, South Africa 7, and 1 death. But since this survey was done, of course, this number has risen. Global cases are increasing daily. South Korea, Iran, Italy, France, and Germany have the highest numbers of reported cases outside China. And the survey findings, samples, characteristics are given here as well. Let's just begin with you, Dr. Collins Odote. You went through this particular report. Your highlights, briefly.
First, as I said, I'm actually extremely excited about what KEPSA has done. To look at it from their members and say, look, this is the operating environment. This is what government is doing. These are the potential negative, these are the negative impacts. These are potential responses. These are the opportunities. I think it's excellent. And for me, several things stand out for me. First is the levels of uncertainty that this virus is bringing. For example, nobody knows when it will end. Nobody knows when a cure will be
Trump
found.
knows.
If we keep relying on him, we are in trouble. Nobody knows when that will happen. And for business, one of the greatest things is uncertainty in any kind of thing, because then you can't do planning, you don't know what. That's the first thing. The second thing is the cancellations of businesses. You know, we all are excited when we were told, you know, from tomorrow, no more conferences of 15 people or more. It looks nice from a health perspective, but take yourself as the hotel which had a booking of 100 businesses coming tomorrow. What do you do with it? How do you deal with those kind of things? The third is the high cost of loans that they talk about, and I just wanted to respond a little bit to Habil because of that. Habil says, please go and talk to your bank to have a discussion with them. I want to plead with him that let the bank not wait for people to go and talk with them. Because of the levels of seriousness of this issue, banks need to be proactive and start thinking about, so what can we do? So that you're not waiting for every individual to come and talk to you. You are reflecting upon and saying, as a banking industry, the same way KEPSA has done. This is the potential impacts. This is our response and contribution to this process so that we're able to deal with it. The fourth thing that you then see them talking about is the high costs of production. And I think you already spoke about it. I was talking to my sister yesterday, and who has a child who is unwell, and she buys drugs every month. So the price, first, the drug was not available everywhere. And that's a drug that the child relies on. So the implication of that on somebody's health is very huge. When she eventually got it at one place, the price was 50% more expensive. Yeah. And this is because of the business environment. So I think those are things that we need to worry about, and KEPSA has spoken about. The one other thing that KEPSA has spoken about and government is dealing with is the levels of information. I think over the past 2 weeks, there was a lot of either lack of information or misinformation. If you look at the opportunities, they talk about a lot of things that we can do. Including how we ensure we diversify our sources of raw materials, how we become more self-reliant, and how we become more innovative in how we carry out business. And thinking about it, in my view, as a friend of mine just sent me a message, for example, about education, where Harvard has now told all students to leave the university and that classes now go online. That's an opportunity even for us. My only issue is, are we prepared? And what are we doing about it? And I think that levels of preparations will require finances. And that's the only place where I disagree a little bit with my colleagues. I think on the Big Four agenda, Patrick says it's on takeoff. it is still, if it's still on takeoff 2 years to the end of President Uhuru's term, I think by the time it ends, it'll still be taking off. So I think there's an opportunity, this is time for critical reflection on the Big Four and to make some hard decisions. Those decisions require us to drop some of the things, not because they're not priority, but because the amount of resources we require is such that we don't have it. And Habil said that the guys at Treasury are dealing with a very difficult economy. When you have a difficult economy, you must be able to prioritize where you put that money. And if you don't do so, you just continue spreading. Gituro and myself agree on housing. I think housing should stop being part of the Big Four. I think we can drop one or two others so that we actually focus much more in terms of ensuring we're moving forward.
Right, so even maybe some of the resources that were to be dedicated to the housing projects, to the manufacturing sector from the Big Four agenda, you know, a large chunk of that money also is being slotted to, you know, preparing and trying to combat also coronavirus as it is here in the country. So resource reallocation, as it were, because this was not something that we had prepared for as well. How will that also affect entirely the Big Four agenda? So, Collins is challenging you that we've been taxing. That plane has been taxing for the longest time. When will we be able?
I think to me it's a question of, but I want to bring Collins, and I think it's a very important as we deal with this, Collins, as you talk about the hotel industry. We have to focus, are we talking about public lights or private lights? This thing is about public lights. We must protect the public. It's more than the private. That company might go through, or that hotel might go through, but more important is the public. And I think that's what you're addressing here, a very, very strong aspect of it. I think the issue of the Big Four perhaps is an opportunity to prioritize them. Because the resources, when the resources are scarce, you go to that. The same happens in your house. One time you're eating steak, you have to reduce to something else. And I think dengue or whatever. In fact, they're better than beef. And I agree with Collins. Yes, if we were to prioritize, I would go first for agriculture, and then I go for manufacturing. The beauty with the manufacturing, you actually don't need government in terms of funds. The private sector can do it. It's only the environment you create for the for that particular sector. So there's an opportunity. Health, if you notice the last two, health and housing, are the ones who have been having issues. There's no issue we have had about manufacturing. But the manufacturers are looking for maybe three things. They are looking at the cost of production. And I think that's what we need. This is an opportunity. When I read the report, they come out there. But this is an opportunity in the medium term. Because short term, in my view, is the whole idea of prevention. How do we mitigate in terms of prevention? The medium term is the issues in the report, the issue of power. That has been killing our manufacturers. The issue of taxation. The issue of what I call transaction costs. It's a nightmare getting business landing here. I have a friend of mine, she's from France. It has taken her over a week just to get an ID. You can imagine somebody takes all the way a flight from France. It's taken a week to do an ID. So if we can work on that, I think I see the opportunity where you provide the private sector with our project. But there's something I wanted to say, which it's perhaps Patrick is to the in my heart. If we can't have water, forget agriculture. It will never happen.
That was going to be my input on the question of resources.
Forget it.
Look at the water projects we've had in this country.
Right.
All of them have been rife with corruption.
The non-existent.
They have actually been done for the wrong purpose. Right? They've
been about to ask you which water projects.
Right? you can. There's many. I mean, you start off with all these. Don't look at the big ones.
I'm agreeing with you because once you mentioned the corruption, I said, oh.
Yeah. Look at not the big ones that have happened recently. Just look at the water, all the water authorities. Which water authorities have actually put into place effective water supplies? Hardly any. And if we can just say for the next 6 to 8 months, as a government, forget all these other sort of BBIs, water view, and everything else. Just focus on getting water, sustainable water supplies to the country. Get things started.
That's the best BBI you can give.
That is the best BBI you could do in this country.
Exactly.
Because the minute you make water available, then effect and also make sure that the water supply and the utilization at the end of the pipeline of water is properly organized, you will find that the economy will take off. Absolutely. Without any other stimulus. That's the first one in terms of getting the big four agenda. In fact, agriculture and manufacturing linked together.
Absolutely.
If you can get the inputs working at reasonable cost, and that is basically making sure water is available and so forth, so you get a continuous supply the whole year of that, then somebody will be willing to invest in the conversion process because they're guaranteed raw material. Recently, we had GMO coming in, which is cotton, which has been approved. That has been on the back burner, I think, for almost 5-6 years. We are approving it now. There was really nothing wrong with it. It's been done, I think it's an motivation in this country. But that is something that could have stimulated the textile industry in this country a long time ago, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is basically to look at the cost of energy.
Indeed.
That's the second big thing,
Indeed.
right? And again, that is something that the government can focus on very clearly. First one is the cost of production. And all these different power purchase agreements you've got into and so forth and so on, the whole of that needs to be looked at and turned upside down. And focus on the dispatch so that we're dispatching the right energy into the grid. But over and above that, the grid itself needs to be looked at.
The grid itself?
Yeah, because if you're looking at the losses within that, not just the actual physical losses, but also what you call the sort of the gray losses, that within the distributor itself. It's not efficient. KPLC is not efficient.
It's 23%.
Right? And if losses are 23%, and that is actually just system losses.
Yes.
But there's also the losses within the corporation itself. Right? If you add that, you're probably talking about 30 to 35% opportunity. And if you turn that out, the cost of power will go down by the same amount very quickly. And you begin to come into the region that the government really doesn't have to intervene and give special whatever it is. It's just that the power will be at the right price. So if you get the water in the right place and working, and you get power at the right cost, those two alone will be enough to stimulate the agricultural sector and get it working, and then manufacturers to now begin to convert.
I think it's an opportunity to challenge the county.
Let's say from Habil, then we'll come to
Sure.
Dr. Getro. Chiming in on still on the resources reallocation.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Patrick in the sense that and I think one of the things that has always been coming up when you're talking about the Big Four is the fact that we have got a resource shortage. And there are two players here, I think. One is the public sector. And when you're talking about the resource shortage, you're looking at what the public sector has got in terms of available resources and how they are allocating it to the Big Four. And therefore, you're talking about should you prioritize and maybe drop off some. But one of the things is the fact that I think if the public sector played their true role of creating an enabling environment so that the private sector can come in with the resources to actually support the Big Four, I think that will go a long way. And with what Patrick was talking about, actually is the issue of the fact that with the right enablers in place, you will see resources flowing in from the private sector to support the Big Four agenda. I think that's one thing that we need to clearly address in terms of the fact that the public sector creating the enabling environment and the private sector therefore being able to come in and pick up where it should pick up. Yeah.
Isn't it amazing when we're talking about water and fighting coronavirus that still our taps are running dry? And we wonder how will we actually try and wash our water, wash our hands if we don't have water at the end of the day. That should be the first priority as it is. Now we should be having flowing, our water from our taps, right?
Even health.
Even health.
Yeah, the water will actually impact on the health side. Yeah. So the Big Four agenda, water is a key thing under all of them.
The main cog.
Yet it is not one of the Big Four.
And no, it cuts across. It's an enabler.
It's an enabler.
It's an enabler. For me, two things. First, what's the rationale of the Big Four? The rationale of the Big Four is to pick out the key priorities where government wants to put in investment and then marshal resources from the private sector so that we're able to stimulate the other parts. And if you even look at budgeting perspective, that's the rationale that if in terms of budgeting, although water is important, we'll give much more money to food security, much more money to housing, because it's part of the president's big four. And for me, it's just that rationale of saying, let's pick out what we think is priority in terms of investment, then the rest will continue being done. Education is being invested still in, but it's not part of one of the big four.
Thank you.
Coming to water,
yes.
You know, the strange thing is, I think during President Moi's time, we used to say that we'll have water by the year 2000 for all. We are now at 2020, so I don't know what the new slogan is. But the reality is, water is such a fundamental aspect of people's lives that if we think about the kind of investments that we've had, if you even look at our budget over the last 5 years, the amount of money that has gone to the water sector is amazing, yet the amount of impact it has had is completely negligible. It is annoying that across the entire country, people are still struggling with basic things about how do I get water, not just to drink. How do I get water even for basic services? How do you get water for, you can't talk about food security when you can't be able to have water for people, when you can't be able to have irrigated agriculture. And yet at the same time, we have huge water towers that we can be able to harvest. Every time in this country, what shocks you is for a whole week, there'll be flooding. The next week, there'll be drought. Yet water comes in, we don't harvest water. I think we must start realizing that we have reached a stage where technology should be able to help us to solve our water problems. We can't be relying on natural water only. And that requires that the investment, that we should put investment to the sector, and those investments must not be siphoned through corruption.
Let's hear from
I just want to talk about this whole Big Four agenda and this BBI. The economy must take first priority, because that is what brings food and income into people's pockets. Unfortunately, the narrative has changed towards politics. The economy just needs to be front and center for government thinking right now, including the chief executive. And the focus should be, for the president right now, focus on the economy. And what do we need to do to make sure we remove the risks from the economy? What do we need to do to make sure we capitalize on the opportunities? The second thing is, and this is absolutely necessary in order to make sure the Big Four agenda is not a stillborn project. Because at the moment, as you've mentioned, we've been poised for takeoff. We're hardly there. And frankly, possibly the need to recalibrate and make the Big Four into a Big Two is probably of vital importance now, given the fiscal constraints that the economy is operating under.
I like that, to two.
Yeah. Then we can take a poll on which
Big Four, top two.
That's Big Four, top two.
Yeah. Big Four, top two. Yeah. Okay. So let me just read one or two tweets that we have here. We have Lokiteso saying, wrong. We should actually take this opportunity and import the best Chinese expertise, I think he meant to say there, to Kenya for as cheap as possible, because they would all love life outside of the COVID-19 hit country, right?
They're already here.
Yeah, they've been here. We should get more of them here. That is what Lokiteso is saying here. If we may just pick it. And then we have also Abdallah saying, how do we increase production while the government is busy increasing taxes from all corners and making it hard for our local industries to thrive? And also, we have MKH saying, Big Four coronavirus, locust invasion, downturn of economy and fight against corruption. These are what government should be focusing on.
That's the Big Four.
Those are your reactions there. Right, so we want to see what sort of economic stimulus package that Donald Trump is actually putting up for the Americans right now. We all know that Dow Jones futures plunged in volatile action on Wednesday night, along with S&P 500 futures and Nasdaq futures, as President Donald Trump said he was banning all travel from Europe to try to fight the coronavirus. Meanwhile, in the sports arena, NBA suspended all games indefinitely after a player contracted the coronavirus. Tom Hanks and his wife also have COVID-19. This is the letters that we know. President Trump has proposed the idea of 0% payroll tax rate for the rest of 2020, as well as offering federal assistance to airlines, hotels and cruise operators that have been hit by cancellations due to the coronavirus. Stocks pared back gains after starting the day positive, briefly falling into the red after news that the Trump administration is still far away from ready to roll out any specific economic proposals in response to the outbreak, according to CNBC. Let's just talk about this particular pronouncement as well from Donald Trump. Should we follow suit and as a country also have an economic stimulus package in light of, since we've not really been affected by this, but you're talking about plannings and mitigations and interventions?
I think start off with what the Ministry of Health did last week on Friday.
Yes.
On Friday, I think that was very positive. I mean, much as it affected us in the Kenya Open, and we had an almost ready. The event was ready to take off. I think when we were actually kept abreast of the potential of that happening before it happened, and it was just stating that the government does not want the cost of trying to mitigate to actually treat the coronavirus in this country. So the key thing is to stop the opportunity of that virus coming into the country. And that's been the focus. And I think that is the right thing to do. Right? And if we spend more on prevention and basically trying to put as many barriers as possible, and also be in the preparedness to actually do the right thing. Like Italy, it took a long time for them to actually get to the place where they could make the right decisions. I think because of the way we've been schooled here already, we are in a position whereby if we do get, and touch wood, it doesn't happen. If we do get a confirmed case in this country, there are already the contingency plans to actually make sure that, or try and minimize the likelihood of that getting into the population. And that is a key thing. Stop it from getting into the population, because once it gets into the population, you have to shut down the whole country and let it basically die out naturally before you can open up the country again. That is really what is happening in China, and Italy has just decided to do that. The US has decided to stop all flights from Europe. They're basically minimizing the risk. Because if you looked at that map that was there, in terms of the red areas, Europe was red, all of it. Yeah. So basically you said that area is a potential source of that virus. And if you look at anything that has come into Africa, all of it has come from Europe. There isn't anything that has gone from one African country to another yet. Right? And the hope is that that is exactly what's going to happen. So Kenya should learn from China, Italy, and be as bold as the US has been to basically
But
say
something
stop.
we need to learn, the point you pointed about China, and I think this is what perhaps they have managed to do it. If you look China and Southeast Asia countries, Singapore, all these areas, people follow the law.
Absolutely.
They are told this is not good, they will not do it. If you go to Italy, US, it's my rights.
Yes.
So imposing those kind of things in those countries is very difficult. And I think that's why we come in. The government is very clear. If this, you stay indoors, you stay indoors. And I think to me that's why it's actually those countries are managing it more. The only issue, excuse me, probably I have with Trump, I'm not quite sure why only UK
has been left out.
Has been
Yes.
exempted.
Yeah, and that one I don't understand. And I can go perhaps to the two guys, Boris and him. Because in terms, even you look, UK is more threatened by what's happening in Europe.
Yeah.
Because of the nearness of the countries. And therefore, if he has to do a ban, I think it should be all the way, but not piecemeal. But I think as we did also, and I think Parker probably could have brought this, the whole idea of the government saying the only plane coming from Italy is go and pick their people who are stranded there and go.
Yeah.
I think that's, to me, is a very good move. I still think there's still something we need to address. And I don't know how far we go in terms of African Union coming very strongly and addressing this. Ethiopian Airlines is still irresponsible. They're still the ones flying there. They're still flying to China.
All right.
I hope there's a lot of mitigation, because it's very easy, prone to move from Ethiopia to a country like this or any other part of Africa. And therefore, I think it's something we need a more concerted effort. I think in the short term, I will not really talk about economic stimulus. It's more prevention.
Prevention. Yeah.
It's more prevention than anything else. In the medium term, we can talk about the economic stimulus. And that economic stimulus will brought what my friend from KM is talking about. So right now, let's focus on how. And water, as you're saying, Collins, is important. If you don't have that water, how do you do it? And then really take opportunity, I'm challenging any county in this country to come what we call agri-city. We don't have an agri-city. We have Garden City, Tattoo City. Can you come with an agri-city?
Konza City.
The one that is nearest starting from that is actually Makueni. They're moving in that direction.
Watch this pace. In 6 months, we have in Kiambu.
Kiambu?
Yes. Take off. Take off.
All right. Briefly, let's wind up on the coronavirus and see also how other sectors are faring on as well.
But I actually wanted just to make one point, because if you listen to some of the comments on Twitter, one of the people said, how can we be talking about increasing production when government is still taxing people as high as possible? And I think for me, the one lesson that we can learn from this process and government action is the importance of policy making and policy responses. I think if you have policies that are well thought through and that have done a clear analysis, you're able to respond to things. If you see what the Ministry of Health has done, in terms of saying, let's stop this flight from coming, that's a policy response to an issue. But a lot of the times, we make policies as jokes. And we don't realize, hey, what are we really responding to? And I think this should be an opportunity for our policy making to start being much more evidence-based. Let's start having MPs discussing critical policy issues. So for example, if we're debating about which big four to go on to, let's not be because I like this.
Let's ask impeachment.
So what is the important thing? When we start discussing our budget, let's ask ourselves not how much is coming to my constituents, but what is the policy rationale for allocating X to this sector and not Y to the other sector. I think that's where we should be moving.
Thank you. All right, let's wind up with that and also try and see what the Business Daily is holding for us today. And briefly also we shall touch on Talo Oil Shocker Bill, the 204 billion shillings Turkana oil bill. People are asking, is that really justified? Even also the government was really shocked by this. That is much, much later. But looking at the front page of a Business Daily, if I may, and just pick it up, we have Kiroshe risking KRA assets seizure of a 9 billion shillings bill. Taxman enforcement of unpaid tax includes attachments and caveating property. We've discussed this here before, and this development now happened yesterday from the courts. Also, CoopBank rescues Jamii Bora in buyout deal. Maybe Habil Olaka will comment on this a bit. And also, Patrick, about what is really happening in the banking sector right now. We have all these mergers. We have right now also we've not had any takeover. Has there been a takeover, as it were, right now? There has been with the KCB.
Well, I think the whole debate about consolidation in the banking sector has been there for quite some period of time, and there have been, views on both sides in terms of, is this the right time for consolidation? Are we going to see more of them? My own view is that I think there is a lot that could be happening. A number of entities readjusting themselves to the new environment and therefore trying to see what is the best way forward, trying to identify synergies amongst yourselves and therefore trying to see which is the best combination going forward. And therefore, the CoopBank Jamii Bora deal that has been more or less been made public to the fact that it's actually going on, I think is a move in that direction, where we see an entity that has gotten some very specific advantages in the market and another one having specific advantages, and they see opportunities in coming together. So this deal may not be the last one. I think there might be more coming up in the market, and I think it's just the right way to go, because it's one thing is fostering financial stability in the banking sector. Yeah.
Right. Patrick?
I think Habil is better pleased to talk about that. But obviously, I think just as a general thing, rather than talking as a banker or a financial services person, I think what you'll get as pressures come on the sector, you begin to get consolidation, and that will happen. I mean, you're seeing that consolidation in the financial services sector, not just banking, in all of them. And that basically looks at the fact that there was an over-investment in that sector for quite a period of time. And then, obviously, with the economy where it is now, the margin pressure on a lot of those institutions is very high. And the only way you can sort of respond to margin pressure is basically by getting volume. And the whole area of financial services globally is volume, not margin. And I think the country is beginning to adjust to the fact that you really need to start getting economies of scale, getting up to size, to be able to now continue to grow in the financial services sector. We've seen that happening with the NCBA coming on board, and you're going to see a lot more of those things happening, not just in the banking sector, but also in the insurance sector, and so forth and so on.
So it looks like the first-tier banks are swelling up also, the lower cadre banks as it is right now. Is it, what is it really informing this particular shift? Because we thought there was an exponential growth, especially with maybe the third-tier banks. I don't know.
I think it's a defensive mechanism as well, and as Patrick says, it's all about economies of scale. So by merging your operations, streamlining them, getting more productivity and more efficiency out of your assets and your returns on investment, that's all about it. Within our own business, for example, we've merged 6 printing companies together. So it's not just a feature of the banking industry. I think you're going to see more and more consolidation within industry, within a lot of industries, possibly even insurance, come through, just purely to get scale, and number 2, drive efficiencies and production out. Because number 1, you can't increase price in virtually any industry right now. The only thing you can do is control costs, and that's probably a driver now. Yeah.
Right. And they're also seeing, I think, the impact, especially in the financial services and stuff like that, is you're beginning to see the impact of technology, of IT, right?
The digital economy.
Yeah, the digital economy. And investment in digital is not cheap, by the way. People think about, just going to digital and you're there. Getting the right digital is not cheap, right? And therefore, even investing in that means that you're still got that margin pressure on you. So you've still got to start getting economies of scale to make the digital investment work for you. So it's all about the recalibration of the economy all around.
All right.
But I actually agree with my colleagues. It's both negative and positive. But I think the negative is that it's an indication of how the economy is performing.
Yeah.
When the economy is robust, every small business can be able to thrive. When it is not, then you must be able to respond to it. And I think the response is because of the performance of the economy. That's the negative side of it. I think the positive is that, thankfully, as opposed to collapses, we are then seeing readjustments to be able to respond to the prevailing economy, but also to prepare for the future. A future where you are less labor intensive and more technological. So if you even relate it to the conversation we were having in the previous conversation, coronavirus, it's also an opportunity of saying the economy, the businesses of the future will even be working from home. And how do you adjust that in terms of the economic, in terms of the technological innovations? It's much easier when you have bigger enterprises, are you able to invest more and you're able to innovate more. I think that's the response we're seeing.
All right. All right, Gituro, finally.
Yeah, I think to me, we probably have so many banks than probably should be having. And I think the point, I think Corinne can put it, I think it's not corrupt, it's the merger. I think that's important. And the question is, how do leverage on efficiency for productivity? So I think it's the right thing to do in it. But there's something perhaps you had asked about the TARO. I think TARO is...
We'll come to it much later. Yes,
but I think the banks, I think we're not saying they're collapsing. And you notice, for instance, the Chase Bank, we have really managed that. And I really, we must give Joroge the good work he probably moved in that area. And of course the chair, Mohamed Nyaoga.
Right, thank you. Maybe back to the Business Daily. The headlining story today is all about Keroshe. As I mentioned, risks carry assets, a seizure of 9 billion shillings bill. And earlier on we saw there were reactions also on the way KRA reacted to this particular developing story. We just want to get our reactions from our panelists. Taxman enforcing of unpaid tax includes also attachments and caveating property as it is. In an environment where we want to, enable businesses to thrive, you think this is the wisest fashion for KRA to really react now that they're slapping this particular 9 billion bill on Keroshe? What is the future of Keroshe?
I think there's two aspects to this. I believe Keroshe will have submitted an application to the High Court to contest this. So they will use the legal avenues to pursue this till the end. and I believe they've disputed the tax tribunal's decision. Keroche have disputed the tax tribunal's decision. So they have the entitlement to go to the High Court and get a judgment. Failing that, they'll probably go to the Court of Appeal. Anyway, the issue here is when you slap a business with what we call a very punitive amount, is that company going to be able to survive and pay tax revenues in future? And the issue is, are you able to have an arbitration mechanism such that you're able to keep the company afloat and it continues to contribute to tax revenues in future and protect jobs? And I believe that would be probably the most suitable outcome if such an avenue can be explored.
Right, Patrick.
I think we haven't seen the end of this. A bill of that size, and I'm just being myself now, a bill of that size to have gone for a period of time without being detected by a revenue authority, I think is in a way irresponsible, right? I mean, an organization such as a brewer, let's not just talk about Keroche, the amount of tax that should come out of that place should be very clearly visible, right?
Predictable, yes.
Yeah, it should be visible. And you should basically be getting in there and basically have, this should have not have been one case, it should have been 30 cases if that tax was really due. So I think here there's a lot of, there's too much smoke for, and there's a very small fire at the bottom of it. And my view is that this is too big for anybody to handle. So it has to go to the highest court in the country for somebody to make a decision that is going to have this kind of, to write off or write in this kind of bill will require somebody who has really looked through all the pros and cons and understands fully the impact all across. Because justice is about weighing the full basket of impacts. Justice is not about a single linear thing that is very narrow.
Agreed.
Right? And I think this is one of these cases that is going to test the judicial system in whichever way to make sure that the outcome of this is going to be something that you can quote in the future about the issues of tax in this country. This is going to be one of these that requires a Solomon moment. Right? And I don't want to sort of put a one way or the other. There are a lot of issues under this that maybe discussing it may not give it the the full exposure in this. And I am watching this with keen interest.
But in terms of incentivizing the business environment,
this kind of stuff, I think the whole issue of, I think that for the business community, let me talk about the generic issue rather than this one. If you look at the number of cases that have gone to the tax tribunal over the last 2 or 3 years, it's gone up. It's almost exponentially gone up. And it's because a lot of the people are not willing to make decisions about tax queries. So everybody's kicking the can down the road. This happens to be a big one. But if you go to the workload of the tax tribunal at the moment, it's like this. So structurally, we need to be bold in terms of making decisions on tax. But at the moment, what is happening is, kick it down the road, let somebody else make the decision, then we apply it. Right? And for industry, that is not good.
I think we have a tendency, we don't like paying taxes.
That is true.
And I think we need to
let him finish. Let him finish. We'll come to you, Dr.
I think I'm just going to. The issue of paying taxes is one, but the issue of paying the right taxes is another.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think the issues here are that there's a lot of times that people are coming in and being locked in for, you're being locked in for the wrong reason, using tax as a fighting tool. So whilst there is, I think the issue of the right processes is important, and we should sort that out so that the tax regime, people are very clear about what is and is not taxable. And then you have very few items that really now you're saying these ones are now the ones that need to go through to the tribunal to be sorted out because we do not have a ruling. But to use the tribunal and the legal system to make all the rulings for the tax people is wrong. But there are also people who basically are criminal in tax. Let that happen to them.
Thank you.
Exactly.
That is.
And I'm not saying Keroche is one of them.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
I'm not.
Debal, actually, for me, I think this is the right way to go. And this is why. Last year, KRA decided to shut down Keroche on criminal aspects, and we all complained. I think that was wrong. You cannot be criminalizing what is essentially a civil debt. First, I think the fact that this has now gone through the civil aspect is the right thing. And the fact that Patrick says it will go until the Supreme Court, for me, I think is perfect. We should never use criminal tools to fight what is essentially a civil matter. Secondly, if you look at the figures, and Patrick is right, it tells you there's more than meets the eye. And maybe that's why criminality was being used as opposed to addressing the fundamental issues. I think this provides an opportunity of asking ourselves, number one, how can we reach a situation where a company owes 9 billion? How is that, what really happened? Is it that the figures are overstated, or is it that somebody slept on the job? And those are things that we must be able to ask. And I haven't seen the ruling from the tax appeal, but that's what we need to get into. And the third thing that arises out of it is we then need to ask ourselves, having determined where the reality is, let's assume Keroche owes. How do we ensure that whatever we do does not lead to its shutdown?
Absolutely.
Number two, does not lead to this kind of thing being repeated into the future. I think that's the more fundamental issue. So, because the reality is, if you slap them with 9 billion and ask them to pay tomorrow, you are essentially also saying you're killing them. We don't want, we should not kill any company, especially an indigenous company, especially in this business environment. But I think for me, the fact that it's going to the High Court and going up is useful, but let it be an opportunity not just of determining the amount. Let it be an opportunity of determining what's really happening in terms of how we are doing our tax business.
Our tax regime in the country. Maybe also we can hear from Dr. Habilo.
Yeah, I mean, I think this case in particular has captured our attention. It has been in the press for quite some, given the figure that has been quoted, I think it's attracting our attention. And I think I was drawn by the fact that I read through what the first one I saw was KRA's statement. And then I also saw Keroche's response. And it's good that at this moment in time they are going to the next step, which is they are disputing the ruling of the tax appeals tribunal, and now they are taken to the next stage, which is the High Court. And possibly, as we discuss this, I think we should also be alert to the fact that given that the matter is being arbitrated upon, I think we should withdraw our views, especially if it might affect the decision that will, the whole process. But having said that, I think one thing that comes out is the fact that, in my view, the 9 billion looked a little bit on the higher side in view of the fact that this is an entity, and 9 billion is not a small amount of money. But looking at the two arguments, it boils down to the fact that the basis of computing the tax was different from what Keroche assumed and what KRA is imputing. And therefore, on one, the tax liability is lower than on the other. And the whole thing is about the process. One is arguing about the process that was used, one is talking about dilution and all that. And I think let the process take its stand. I think they are going to the next stage, which is the High Court. In case it doesn't satisfy them, they'll move to the next level, which is the Court of Appeal, and let it take its course. At least let's give them a fair chance.
All right, Dr. Kituro.
Yeah, I think to me it's, and I want to make clear that we know people who have evaded tax, but if it's right, I think we need to find a way of soft landing. And you can come. I think KRA has a problem. They always what would I call them? They get a kick when you have so much to pay to them. They're like happy all the way. But I think if this is the case, perhaps we must keep Keroche fruiting. That's the first thing to come in. Then we go down, what are the ways? If this is the right amount or is not, how do you deal with that? And I think that's what probably we should do. And I think what KRA should appreciate, or the tax regime in this country, yes, there was a sleeping on at the job, but they should encourage more people to come in terms of production companies, so that we can create opportunity for our people. And that's what Keroche does. But also, that self-regulation is extremely important. As Keroche have a responsibility, or any other company for that matter, to pay taxes. And this came up in terms of, if I recall, during the IPO for Safaricom, we had a lot of low stockbrokers. Messed up the whole industry. You get a mama from Nyeri or whatever, or Bugoma, sells a cow together to buy them. But these stockbrokers went all over. So there's somewhere you have to manage ourselves. And I'm not saying that Kiloka could be in it, but I think what we need to do is let's get the bottom of it. Even if you go to Supreme Court and there's a certain amount be paid or not be paid, I think it's important we find them a way of paying it in a softer way.
Right. Thank you. I'll be remiss if we don't also wind up the show by looking at what is happening, especially in the oil sector. Just briefly, won't discuss it very extensively. And this is what we ran yesterday on the front page of the Business Daily. There was a shocker, such an eye-popping figure. People wondering how then even the government is grappling with this particular amount that we have here. The Ministry of Petroleum rejects Talo's compensation bill, arguing it was excessive and not justified. Talo shocks state with 204 billion shillings, and we just want to maybe, I think Patrick, about this snugly fits,
This is his area.
Your portfolio.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us about this development, because of course, from the downstream and upstream, where are we at?
I think oil exploration is not for the faint-hearted. That's the first statement I'll make. It's not for the faint-hearted. The movement of one rig to drill one hole is just the drilling of one hole costs about $20 to $30 million. What is that in Kenya shillings? It's a lot, right? So if you're talking about success to find oil, you're talking about drilling maybe 20 or 30 holes in the ground. So at $20 million a shot, that is $400 million. And that you could do and find zero and walk off. So this is a high stakes game. So let's just talk about the oil business is a high stakes game. The key element is that when you start down that road, your agreements between the government and the exploration company have got to be very clear about the liabilities plus the rewards that happen at the end. So when a nation starts that, you're saying we have a piece of ground, we have a bit of geology that says there may be oil in this place. So all you start off with as a nation is some land, several hundreds of thousands of hectares, and you tell somebody go and look. All you invest is the land. This person has got to get all the technology to come in, start looking for it, and try and find it. And every time they're doing that, they're spending money. And they're borrowing money. And that money they're borrowing comes with a cost. And in any agreement for exploration, the first thing you say is, the minute you find anything, I will recoup my expense of getting here first, before you start seeing the cost of oil. So when you find oil, that's what the discussion is happening now. I'm putting all my costs on the table, and now you've got to agree how you're going to recoup that cost. Because I took a risk, and my risk is now paying off. So I've got to recoup my costs. And an oil company is basically working across the globe, not just here. So they borrow, and they are balancing all their risks around the globe to borrow that money. So here you found oil, you need to get your money back to be able to continue in business. And when you then slap that bill down, and you've been at this now since when? Since about 2004. This is 16 years of exploration. That is not an unreasonable figure. It's just that it's coming out now. And I think in the era of openness in the oil business, the contracts need to be brought to the fore. And the costs need to be brought to the public every year. So we know that on a certain trajectory, this is the amount that has been spent on exploration so far. So that you don't get surprised
by such a
figure, which is not unreasonable, right? There needs to be an audit done in terms of the costs. Are these really just costs for here? Or have you added other costs and so forth?
Thank you.
So the reality is, oil exploration is not a faint-hearted person's business. And our government has got to accept that they have got to pay a certain amount out of the oil that is coming out. It's called cost oil, that is in the contract. And it's a question of just defining how much it is.
All right, thank you. Let's hear from Collins Ododo, because there has been issues also.
But you know, Patrick works for the oil industry. So this figure cannot be unreasonable.
I don't work for the oil industry. I used to work in the oil industry. So
I concede,
I'm
used
now
to work
Kenyan.
for the oil industry and has done a lot of support for the extractive sector from a private sector perspective. So I think that figure is not unreasonable from his perspective. I think from the larger perspective, first, I don't pity the government. I don't pity the government because this was coming and the government pretended it wasn't and acted against its own interest. Several people, I remember having this conversation with a lot of people in this process and raising the concern that Patrick is now talking about now, about openness, but asking, let's have full disclosure. Because this was going to happen. It's happened everywhere that Talo has been. There's actually an ongoing contestations with Uganda. But we never seem to learn, because if we had been able to disclose the terms of the agreement, every Kenyan would have known this is what we are getting into. I think no less than the governor of Turkana. I remember being in a meeting in Turkana, and the governor of Turkana was saying, I am the governor, I have no idea what the terms of this agreement is. Every time you raise the concern, Talo would say, we have no problem disclosing, but that's the responsibility of government. Government will be mum and will be saying, you know. Now they're
We are bound by contractual agreements, yes.
Now they are slapped with a bill that we are now being told this is the bill because it's going to be our taxpayers' money. I think it is important that we realize that when there are concerns around anything, when people say let's disclose, it's not because they're against it. It's because so that we are able to collectively know what we are getting into and we're able to balance. We should have asked ourselves, by the way, if these are the potential costs, what does it mean? But the second thing, which is actually more fundamental, is we'll have a huge debate with Talo, because determining how much has been spent and by whom, you might find that the only people who are keeping records is Talo. So as government, we'll be reacting. So they have their figures, whether it's figures from Ghana or from Turkana, the basis of contesting it will be on your heart, not on facts and figures. And that's why I don't pity government, because they were warned, but they refused to listen.
Right. Let's hear from Sanjan.
I think my colleagues have touched on this. I agree. There must have been figures put into the original contracts, verify those against what has been submitted. Whatever has been submitted needs to be audited. Due diligence needs to be done properly by government. And if the amounts are due, the government will have to pay out, because it's a contractual obligation. So I think for government to act surprised at this stage is probably disingenuous, because I don't think we can pretend to be shocked by this, especially if there are contracts to back this up.
All right. Okay. Hamid Olaka, briefly. I know we're just taking a cursory look. We'll have a very extensive discussion on this on a dedicated show, just oil and gas sector, what is really happening. Briefly.
I think today we have been talking about huge figures. It's 2 or 4 billion, 9 billion.
How much do you have to say about this?
And I think it boils down to the fact that the whole figure, it hits us and is a shock because of the magnitude of the figure. Same thing happened to the 9 billion. It hits us and is sort of like a shock. And as Patrick said, the figure looks reasonable given the
16
the
years
length of time it has taken. And as my friend says as well, it doesn't pity the government either because of the fact. But I think it boils down to the fact that there is lack of transparency. And the question is the transparency from the government or transparency from Talo? And given the discussions and what you mentioned, the fact that this thing has been raised before in a number of fora, and at the end of the day, I think the thing rests on the fact that the public have not been warned or alerted to the fact that this thing is building up. It's there, and we'll eventually have to meet it anyway for us to reap the benefits of the oil find. So at the end of the day, I think this points to the fact that we need to be transparent and disclose everything to the public who need to know what they are going to bear.
Thank you. The full disclosure that Collins was talking about. Lastly, let's hear from Dr. Kituro.
Yeah, I think it's something perhaps we need to understand about Taro. I think Taro is going a difficult time as we talk. You notice they have reduced their production. And secondly, I think more importantly, the exploration director and the CEO quit. That has a terrible impact on it. But I think fundamentally, what I bring to the table I think as a government now, we need to manage the expectations. There was so much high expectation of this oil from Turkana, and I think that's the key. Now, how do we manage those expectations in terms of that? Yes, I agree with my team, 204 billion over 16 years. I think that probably we could have done things differently. And it's the same thing, you go to the loans we are having, the same kind of thing. But I think the key thing is how do we manage those expectations now?
Thank you. Right. Let's leave it at that. Thank you very much for your contribution, our panelists this morning. We really do appreciate, and of course, we shall dedicate this particular discussion more intensively to try and see also the full disclosure that you're really talking about. Who is not telling the truth here? Is it Tullow? Is it the government? And also the business practices also of Tullow Oil. Remember, there was also an expose done by the delegation on the workings of the farm in Turkana as well, so we'll drill deeper into that as well. But for now, I want to give you the direction of the day as far as activities are concerned. Our True North is up, and this is the activity or some of the meetings that we'll be having today. The Global Hunger Index, that is GHI, annual report is set to be launched today in Nairobi. The report is a tool designed to measure and track hunger at global, regional, and national levels to assess the progress and setback in combating hunger. Also launch of Lactation Center at the Department of Health complex next to KMTC Nairobi. This is a project that focuses on child health, nutrition, growth and development. And we'll leave you also with a quote of the day. A lack of transparency results in distrust and a deep sense of insecurity. A lack of transparency results in distrust and a deep sense of insecurity. That is from Dalai Lama. A post giver for you as well. Is there transparency in a Tullow oil bill as well? Right? We'll focus into that much later, maybe in the course of this month as well. Thank you for your valued company. My name is Jabala Nair. Have a lovely day.
iAbiri is a solution that gives you the power to book a ticket to your destination at the right time and the right price. Download the app or log on to www.iabiri.com or call us on 0709 215 215 to book your ticket now.
Such a liar! Don't you see why she's trying to get close to you now that all three of you are already in my custody? Don't believe what she's saying, it's not true. Remember all the horrible things that she's capable of and what kind of mother she is. You want me to carry your daughter's baby? I'm not married and...
You'll regret it if you don't accept our offer.
Adele, I'm sure you would keep this a secret.
Sour Shower has never been better with the new look Sour. Now with a new formulation too that will leave you feeling fresh for longer, while the soap lasts even longer.
There are issues that we need to discuss as Africans. How shall we feed our growing population? Because that's a terribly important point. The youth, the biggest stakeholders in this scenario, how do they fit in and what lessons can they learn from the current crop of leadership? What is their dream of Africa? What do they think Africa should be in the next 60 years? Because this really indeed is their conversation. And what can they contribute to the realization of that dream?
East Africa is transforming. and so are we. We are now more diverse, more visual, more engaging. Grab a copy of the new East African. To subscribe, email subscription@ke.nationmedia.com.
This is NTV.
Cattle rustling is no longer a cultural lifestyle by pastoralist communities living in northern Kenya. It is a multi-billion commercial venture orchestrated by ruthless businessmen. They are aided by government officials, politicians and community leaders who arm warriors to carry out deadly raids. These raids have left hundreds of innocent civilians dead and thousands of livestock stolen.
Imekuwa ni biashara. Kuna wafanyabiashara wako tayari. Hata kuna watu wamewahi kuwa wakiwa na pesa nyingi. Wanafuata wale riders.
Livestock theft has been commercialized. And there's a lot of collusion between different players.
To get a clear view of how the heinous activities perpetrated under the very watchful eyes of security agencies in the country, we set out to the axis of cattle rustling that is rampant in 5 counties: Turkana, Samburu, Baringo, West Pokot and Elgeyo Marakwet. In Turkana, we head to Kibish, located 968 kilometers from Nairobi, a fertile contested area in northern Turkana that borders Ethiopia, Uganda and South Sudan, where we come face to face with the heavily armed Turkana child warriors.
Unakuja kwa ng'ombe yetu hii. Tunatupigana.
We will also show how easy it is to buy guns and ammunition. Next, we head southeast and traverse across Baringo, where we get first-hand confession from a reformed Pokot cattle rustler.
Mimi ni wa kwanza kuenda kule kuchukua wanyama kwa msee anaitwa Stanley Lumput, na hizo mbuzi nilizileta, serikali wakaanza kunifuata.
And a touching tale from a Tugen widow left with 3 young children after her husband was shot dead by Pokot cattle rustlers.
Wameuawa tu ikaenda tu hivyo. Na walikuwa wamesema watafuatilia.
Hakuna mtu ameshikwa.
Hakuna.
Still in Baringo, we will reveal how 67 pupils in Kapindasum Primary School are under 24-hour police protection due to persistent attacks from cattle rustlers.
Tunasikia wameingia wanafamia upande ule. Sasa tukiwa kwa shule, nasi tunakuwa na wasiwasi. Hali ya usalama wetu sio garanti kabisa.
At Ngenyang, which is Kenya's second largest animal market, we interact with traders who have fallen victim to cattle rustling.
Hiyo mbuzi tumekosa hivyo mpaka tumeenda kotini, tumeenda wapi, tumeshinda, tumewacha.
Kama za mfugo ya mtu imepotea, imeibiwa kwa nyumbani na imepatikana kwa soko, sisi watu tunafuatilia kwa mwenye amenunua, tupate mwenye amenunua, tueleze amenunua kwa nani.
We then move east to Elgeyo Marakwet to highlight one of the major access routes used to transport stolen cattle destined for urban markets, both locally and internationally. From the vast Kerio Valley, we travel further east to Suguta Valley in Baragoi, Samburu, where 42 security officers were killed in 2012. At the community gravesite in Baragoi, 2 more bodies are being laid to rest as a result of bandit attack.
Haijapatikana suluhisho hata moja ya kujua kwa nini watu wanapigana hii Baragoi.
From Samburu, we move to West Pokot, Turkana hotly contested border at Kainuk, where River Takwel is a source of livelihood, as well as deadly confrontation between the Pokot and Turkana.
Nilipigwa hapa hivi, ikatokea hapa.
Kulikuwa na mfugo, ng'ombe, mbuzi. Wakati huo nikachunga, nikakuja nikalala jioni. Nimelala sasa mwendo wa saa 6 usiku hivi. Wakatuvamia, kumbe waadui wako karibu, wamezingira hapo nyumba kwetu na nyumba jirani. Wakavamia grupu ngine penye jirani ilikuwa, grupu ngine kwetu. Waadui walikuwa 100 and above.
Walikuwa na bunduki.
Bunduki ndio wanatumia ku-raid, sio kitu kingine, sio fimbo. Kutoka hapo walichukua ng'ombe ya jirani wakapitisha penye nimelala hapa. Ilikuwa tu nusu mvu, kifo katikati na uhai.
36-year-old Richard Dakale, now a father of 6, was only 7 years old when the massacre occurred in 1992.
Na wanachinja watu. Juzi wamepiga kijana mwingine hapa risasi. Juzi mwezi wa Septemba wamepiga risasi huyo kijana. Kwa hii mwenye anapaka hii ya hii mlima hii. Alikufa. Walipata tu katikati ya ng'ombe. Wakaua kijana, walipeleka ng'ombe karibu 40. Unajua mambo ya raid hapa ni mingi ambaye uncountable. In every month inafanyika karibu 4 times. Kuua mtu na kuchukua mfugo. Saa zingine wanaua binadamu, sana wakipata mwanaume. Sasa kitambo bunduki ichukuliwe, wanaume wote wataisha. Wale wa kufuga wataisha. Watakuja tu kupiga tu risasi one by one.
For decades, the Turkanas from Kenya, Toposa and Didinga from South Sudan, and the Nangatom and Merile from Southeast Sudan and Southwest Ethiopia respectively, have been fighting for territorial supremacy. The borders of the 3 neighboring countries, placing North Turkana at the center in a place called Kibish, forms what is known as the Ilemi Triangle. Measuring between 10,320 and 14,000 square kilometers, this territory, situated in northwestern part of Kenya and bordering South Sudan to the north, Uganda to the west, and Ethiopia to the northeast, the Ilemi Triangle constitutes Kibish sub-county in Turkana North, a place that is fiercely contested by both South Sudan and Kenya.
The whole of this area, it's as you know, it's a dispute area. The South Sudanese, especially, they claim it's their land. Historically, the Ethiopians, but back 100 years ago, they also had claims on that. But nowadays, I don't see them claiming much. But it used to be an area, a grazing area for the communities of South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Kenya. And eventually, because of the war, South Sudan, there was an agreement with the Kenya government, the former SPLA at those times, that this area could be administered by Kenya for the time being because the South Sudanese war. So, of course, Kenyans, they really administer it proper in the sense that they put the borders, they make a huge development of infrastructures. If you have seen Kibish, for example, and they put the flag there to say that this is our place. So now the issue is that still, if you go to Google, we are in South Sudan now here. Google Maps, we are in South Sudan. But this is Kenya, administered by Kenya, and we have Turkana people who are Kenyan, so to say, no? So eventually, that tension is still there, okay? I think that eventually it will become Kenya, I guess, because all the services, all the infrastructures are provided by the Kenya government, so to say, no? And I think if there is a good understanding that the bordering communities can benefit as well of the little resources available in terms of drought, for example, to allow them to come, if mechanisms are established that they can share some of the resources for a peaceful coexistence, I believe that things can improve, though it takes time.
Human and livestock blood flows freely in the volatile Elemi Triangle as neighboring communities attack one another at will without intervention by respective governments. Here, jungle law carries the day with occupants armed to the teeth.
Wakati mvua ananyesha kuweka maji hapa, watu wa Sudani anaishi hapa chini hapa, wa Turkana anaishi hapa katikati hapa. Hasa mali wakati ni watu wa Sudani kuingia tu kwa hiyo nini hiyo, kwa hiyo bush basi hiyo mmegongana na chuma hapa, mmetolewa ng'ombe, mbuzi, kila kitu. Mtu anakupia hapa tu yote.
Kwa hivyo mvua ikinyesha hapa ni hatari.
Ni hatari kabisa. Hata kutoka asubuhi kupita hapa asubuhi napatana na watu wa Sudani huko hapa, anaenda chini ya hiyo laga, kuna maji chini yake hapa hivi.
Unapigana mara 10. Hapa tu hapa hii manyata hii. Ile huko kwa nini hiyo? Unapigana kwa donguru hapo. Unachukua nini? Mbuzi yetu huko kwa ile anaitwa hare. Unachukua
mbuzi ngapi?
Mbuzi 300 hivi.
Atomana kana ngba ngevia yuni ngbarenda ya akwana kana ngevia yakar ne mama tomana amana banya ye oye ngaga donganguni.
Communities living here in Kibish use this firearm as their only means of protection. Scarce resources such as water and pasture have remained to be contentious here in Kibish area that is being disputed because of its enormous grazing land.
The government has deliberately said that we are not going to disarm the NPRs that are in sub-counties that are along our border until we have an agreement, a disarmament agreement with our neighboring countries. So for now, I think the Turkanas along that border are going to remain with those firearms because we don't want again to expose them to attacks from people from across the country. But anybody else within Turkana, any other person, is going to be. In fact, the only people that are not going to disarm in Turkana along that border are the NPRs. But any other person with a firearm is going to be disarmed.
But it's not just the National or Kenya Police Reservists who are armed, as the regional commander says. We found children as young as 10 years and who should be in school but have turned into warriors. They spend most of their time in the bush using high-caliber firearm to protect their community and livestock from possible attacks. So volatile is the situation in this region that, on the very day we toured the area, unknown bandits attacked the Kibish police station, firing 5 shots at the station before crossing over the Omo River into Ethiopia. Moments before the police station attack, we had witnessed a herder armed with an AK-47 grazing his goats just outside the gate of Kibish Police Divisional Headquarters before heading past a beacon that indicates the border between Kenya and Ethiopia.
Matopoza sahi landmark yao ni mulima yenye wanapigania sahi. ni kunyakua masenta akaikori yote mpaka Kibisi. Wanasema ni yao.
Insecurity in this region has been worsened by the influx of guns and ammunition, mainly from South Sudan. In one of the centers known as Kokoro, we were able to buy freely 5 rounds of 18mm ammunition, each at a cost of 200 Kenya shillings. An AK-47 rifle like the one I am being offered here goes for 80,000 Kenya shillings, or an equivalent of 2 to 4 cows depending on the sizes. Almost every young man carries a gun openly. Bullets are sold in kiosks alongside groceries and preserved milk.
We're now going to be shown where the guns and ammunition are kept. According to locals here, they have to be armed in order to counter any threat.
AK-47.
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 The most popular firearms, which are easily accessible in the wild north, are the German Heckler & Koch G3 rifle, famously known as the G3 rifle, AK-47, and the Australian Steyr rifle. The guns mainly enter Kenya through a place called Nakadok from Narus, which is on the Uganda-South Sudan border, where the Nangatom and Karamajong traders acquire AK-47s for only 30,000 Kenyan shillings. The G3 rifle trades for 150,000 Kenyan shillings due to its long distance firing range. The Kenyan government is now trying to control the firearms trade.
Anyone who's holding illegal firearms, because we know there are some people who have been getting firearms even across the border from Ethiopia, to surrender them to the police. Or else we will go and look for those firearms ourselves. Because there are people who have been engaged in illegal activities. We will not allow that any part of our country is interfered with by criminals and thugs.
As government, we note that only government agencies are supposed to have firearms, or citizens who have gone through the normal process and are given firearm license, then they can hold firearms. But to have weapons that we cannot account for, then it becomes very challenging even to do policing.
Kwani serikali alikuwa mjinga wakati tena aligawia ma KPR tena. The same serikali ndio anakuja tena kunyang'anya. Walifikiria namna gani instead aongeze kuliko kusubtract tena. Hiyo tena ni kuletea shida mpaka walemavu watakuwa wengi, hata watachundwa serikali atatatua gani.
Mambo ya kuchukua bunduki kwa KPR imeleta usalama, kwa sababu sisi tukiwa wakaaji ya Kainuk, watu wa town tuliajiriwa, unapeana makaratasi yako uajiriwe. Hakuna KPR ambaye hajasoma, tulikuwa tunafanyiwa recruitment.
Iko kwa sheria kwamba kwa hiyo National Police Service bunge ilipitisha na Uhuru akasign kwamba KPR wawe na bunduki, wawe train, wawe na uniform na wawe na allowance, na wawe mbele ya ng'ombe. Ilipitishwa last parliament 2015. So hata kuchukua hiyo bunduki ni kinyume ya sheria. Go and read section 100 up to 104 of the National Police Service Act. It is there in black and white.
We're not going to return those firearms to NPRs. Not now, not ever. Reason being very simple. These guys buy firearms, but it's very difficult to acquire ammunition, risasi. What do? They use government-issued ammunition through NPRs. And NPR will respond to a distress call. He uses 2 rounds of ammunition. He'll tell the OCB that he's used 100. He's given 100. he gives to his community or he uses those firearms in his other illegal firearm, now ostensibly to protect the community. Yeah. So anytime you hear a leader saying we want NPR, is because he's actually unable to procure ammunition.
In March this year, DCI detectives gunned down 29-year-old Lonyang Karen and Kaponyang Achom, aged 41, after they were found transporting 1,850 bullets from Uganda at Kitalakapel in West Pokot. The DCI acted on intelligence brief that the two have been supplying illegal guns. According to intelligence reports, a former MP for a constituency in Baringo continuously used his position in an influential parliamentary committee to demand for guns and ammunition for Kenya police reservists in his constituency. But the guns ended up in the hands of civilians and contributing to cattle rustling in the Kerio Valley region. Out of the 13,805 registered firearms holders in Kenya, 9,398 were vetted by the government, while 4,407 did not turn up by the end of the deadline. Geneva-based Small Arms Survey says there are about 750,000 firearms in private hands in Kenya, up from 680,000 in 2016. This makes Kenya's cache for private guns the largest in East Africa. Tanzania, whose population is about 8 million more than Kenya, comes a distant second with 427,000 guns in private hands. Just this year, 350 guns mysteriously disappeared from a police warehouse in Nairobi, only to be intercepted in Nakuru. The firearms were destined for Elgeyo Marakwet and Turkana counties to arm the Kenya Police reservists. It took the intervention of Deputy Inspector General Edward Mbugua, who reportedly gave the order for the weapons to be intercepted and returned to Nairobi.
Hata serikali inajua bunduki ya haramu iko. Mtu ako na 5, mtu ako na 4. Na sasa kama serikali anasema mlete bunduki, anaambia machifu waende walete bunduki, mtu atatoa 1, 4 ibaki. Baada ya mwezi 3, 6 biashara inaanza tena.
But the endless conflict in Ilemi Triangle is no longer an isolated territorial dispute among Kenya's Turkana, South Sudan Toposa and Nangatom, or Ethiopia's Merile tribe. Opportunists who are taking advantage of the situation in the wild north have transformed the once cultural community raids into a multi-billion venture in the name of cattle rustling. These activities are led by bloodthirsty and greedy meat merchants, as well as politicians working under the very eyes of security agencies.
Wako ndani ya community wanajulikana ni wafanyabiashara tu kama wengine. Kama wewe ni mfanyabiashara wa nyama, lazima utanunua wanyama. Kama wewe ni mfanyabiashara ya mahindi, ni mahindi utanunua.
Inasafirishwa usiku. Ikichukuliwa tu kuna magari iko standby ya kusafirisha hiyo mbuzi ama ng'ombe. Wewe utapata tena. Hakuna siku mbuzi serikali imerecover. Wakati walinipiga risasi 2 kaanguka chini. Huyo mwingine akakuja akafikiria nimekufa. Na nilikuwa na bunduki ya serikali. Wakati huyo mwenye alikuwa anataka kuja kuchukua bunduki, nikamlime yeye. Mlime kichwa. Na akakufa hapo hapo. Na mimi nikasonga nikaingia ndani ya msituni. Baadaye huyo KPR mwenzangu alishindwa nguvu na akatoroka.
That was the 4th cattle rustling attack that 34-year-old Ekiru has survived at Kainuk, a disputed area in Turkana South, bordering West Pokot County. This year alone, over 20 people have been killed as the Pokot and the Turkana communities claim ownership of this area, rich in pasture and water from River Takwel. Just weeks before we arrived, 2 people were shot dead near Akena Wildlife Service base. The area is currently being patrolled by the anti-stock theft unit using an armored personnel carrier. This is the famous River Takwel, here being referred to as River Malite. It is a major resource for residents here who use it for agriculture, livestock, as well as domestic purposes. Now, before the raids, livestock used to flock around this particular area, but it's not just about insecurity along the river. It's also about this bridge on my right called Kainuk Bridge, whose construction has been delayed by up to 5 years due to constant and persistent insecurity along and around this particular place.
Kwanza ilikuwa ni mambo ya utamaduni, alafu baadaye watu walipokuwa ikawa ni biashara ya kununua kuchukua kuiba mifugo na kwenda kuuza kwingine kwa kujipatia kujinufaisha kwa mahitaji ya kijamii nyingine.
Kina nani hao walikuwa na nunua?
Habari iliyopatikana ni kwamba kila mara kwa security ni kwamba utapata wakati wana raid kuna yule wachuruzi ambao walikuwa wananunua mifugo wanatembea pamoja na watu wenye wanaiba mifugo. Kwa hivyo hii ina maana kwamba kuna washuruzi waliojiingiza ndani kuwasukuma wengine kwenda kuiba ili wao waweze kununua kwa bei nafuu na kwenda kuuza kwingine.
From Turkana, we head to Baringo County via Kerio Valley in Elgeyo Marakwet County. Here we come face to face with a 41-year-old reformed Pokot cattle rustler who gives us chilling accounts of how raids are planned and executed.
Mwaka wa 1996 wakati huo nilipoweza kuamua kuingia msituni na kuwa mchambazi wa kuibia wengine wanyama. Hasa vita ambayo inaendelea katika Baringo Central hapa Rukus, mimi ni wa kwanza kuenda kule kuchukua wanyama kwa msee anaitwa Stanley Lumput, na hizo mbuzi nilizileta, serikali wakaanza kunifuata na kunitambua, na wakati huo sikuweza kuwa na amani kwa sababu hata kuishi kwangu nyumbani ilikuwa ni wasiwasi, na serikali walikuwa nataka kuniua na kunichukulia bunduki. Na nimeona mambo watu wakikufa, marafiki zangu wenye nilikuwa na raid na wao hakuna ambaye hako hata na moja mpaka wale wetu tukiwa hivi. Na nikaona hiyo maisha ya kuteseka msituni na kuibia wengine sio vizuri. Na hata hivyo kuna siku nimeenda kule Naivasha, sehemu za Gilgil, nimeibia wengi. Sio ati Pokot peke yao, nimeibia Wakikuyu wenye wanakaa huko. So nilipoona na kukuja kukaa chini na kujihesabia ile mtu anaponyang'anya kitu yake na kuhangaika, nikaona ni uchungu sana, kwa sababu mtu akibaki katika maisha ya ubweke sio vizuri, na ni kwa sababu ya mwanadamu mwingine.
It may appear as if it's an inter-community thing, that will find that the Turkana have gone to steal from the Pokot. People want to make it appear like that one community is raiding another one. But the true position is that the thieves from the Turkana community are in constant touch with the thieves in the Pokot community, and they talk. So that a Pokot will actually steal animals from his own community and hand over to the Turkana. Or they're liars, and show them direction. Because some of those places you go there, if you're not very careful, if you are a stranger, you can get lost. You cannot steal and leave. So there's a lot of collaboration.
In 2017 kuna huyu majirani walipofahamiana wa hapa North Baringo, kuna watu hawakuwa wameenda raid na mali zao zikachukuliwa bila hatia, lakini yule mwizi ambaye aliibia hakupatikana. So nilikuwa nataka kuomba ya kwamba jambo lolote ikiweza kutokezea kama vita, wale jamii kama sisi wa Pokot wenye tunawaelewa uwezi, yule mwizi apate kufuatwa bila yule mwananchi ambaye hakukosea kwenda popote kukuzwa. hasa wakati huu kuna shida ambayo imechangia tu kidogo kidogo. Hasa tuko sahi na resources kama stima hapa hivi. Tulikuwa naomba serikali waweze kujua kwamba hata sisi tunaweza kuajiriwa wenye tumekuwa na makaratasi hiyo ya class 8. Tunaweza andikwa hata kuwa na kitu ya kufanya pale. Lakini tukiona mpaka wa leo tumeweka nje bila kuangalia kwamba tunaweza jifanyia kitu ama hii faida ya kwetu naweza tufaidi. So tukifikiria na kutazama wengine wakitoka nje ya kwetu hapa hivi, tunaweza fikiria mbaya na kupanga kwamba kwani hao wengine wanafanya nini, wanakula kwetu na sisi hatupate faida. Katika hiyo hali ya kuleta mifuko, kuiba na kuleta, hii watu hawana mahali pengine wapeleka soko. Soko yote ni hapa. Na kama kuna mbuzi anaweza kufa, atakufa. Kwa sababu kila na wakati mbuzi haya ya wizi inapatikana hapa kwa hii soko. Ikishikwa tunafanya hiyo kesi, tunatatua, inaenda police station, tunaanza kuchunguza hiyo tu katika hiyo transaction.
Alafu mwenyezi aliuza, tunaenda kukaa chini na leaders kama chief wa hiyo area, assistant chief committee, tuone vile tutasuluhisha, tujue ni kijana alitoka kwa boma ya nani. Kwa sasa kwa sheria yetu ya Pokot, sasa kama mtu kuna sheria kama mtu uliiba ng'ombe wanapea faini, ijulikane italipwa kiasi gani, double ya hiyo.
38-year-old Warku Dalacha, a goat trader from Kiamaiko slaughterhouse in Nairobi, was caught up in the trade of stolen livestock from unscrupulous brokers.
2-3 years ago, iko mbuzi ameshukishwa Margat, ametunyang'anya. Mtu mmoja anashika mbuzi, hiyo mbuzi hatujui nani nauzia sisi siku hiyo, ndio tumekosa hiyo mbuzi hivyo. Wakati hiyo bande na bande ile iko watu wanazozana. Sasa mtu anapanda gari na shika, ikishika watu wananchi wengine na kuja kuvamia sasa gari.
Si kwa sababu mimi ni Mturkana, Turkana wakienda wanaweka. Hata Pokot wako wao wanasema Turkana ni wazuri, si kama Marakwet. Marakwet watakatakata miguu. Lakini Turkana wanaenda wanaweka, Pokot wanaweka kwa gari, wanauza. Wamejua ni kitu kizuri, ni biashara. Lakini Waturkana bado wako nyuma. Wanaiba wanapeleka tu ya Pokot, wanaenda wanafuga. Si kwamba waibi, wanaiba kama na wengine. Pokot wanaiba wanauza, Turkana wanaiba wanaenda wanaweka. Pokot wakikuja wanachukua. Hivyo ndio vile Pokot wanapenda Waturkana, wanawawekea. Ni ile merry-go-round.
On a market day such as Monday, up to 2,000 goats and 150 cattle are sold, which in turn brings a revenue to the county government of about 180 to 200,000 shillings. Cattle rustling targeting markets in Nairobi or Nakuru prefer Nginyang market because of its proximity to the urban centers and affordability. For instance, a fully grown goat at Nginyang market costs as low as 3,000 shillings, which is sold in urban towns such as Nairobi from 6,000 Kenya shillings or 450 shillings a kilo, earning the trader over 100% in profit. Before it gets to Nginyang market, the stolen herd is normally driven from Katile to Kapedo, then Chemolingot, and finally arrives at Nginyang. The Nginyang, Loruk, Marigat, Nakuru route is also another option for bandits and brokers to deliver stolen livestock to targeted urban markets. Koloa Road is among key routes used by cattle rustlers to transport cattle from this particular place all the way to Eldoret via West Pokot. To my right is the volatile Kerio Valley that has been a center of battle between neighboring Pokot and Marakwet communities. Stolen livestock is usually transported at night to avoid police roadblocks. While driving along one of the routes at night, we met a canter truck which abruptly stopped upon detecting that we had pulled over. The driver of the canter waited for about 5 minutes, perhaps to see whether we would proceed with our journey in the opposite direction. But after noticing we weren't in a hurry to do so, he drove the canter off the road and went in a different direction. We did not follow the vehicle as we had no security backup. Brokers who are bold enough transport stolen herds in broad daylight by bribing security personnel patrolling major highways. An audit by the Inter-African Bureau for Animal Resources estimates that in the period between 1996 and 2000, when meat business was booming, a total of 110,921 goats and 42,109 sheep were slaughtered at Kiamaiko, with an average of 25,000 goats and 8,000 sheep slaughtered yearly. The Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, estimates 63% of Kenya's beef, mutton and chevron is produced in pastoral areas and ranches. According to the IGAD Center for Pastoral Areas and Livestock Development, ICPALD, the estimated annual average cost of pastoral live animals in the country is 233 billion Kenya shillings. The Kenya National Survey 2019 puts the total value of livestock produced through pastoralism last year alone at 180 billion shillings, contributing to 12% of the gross domestic product GDP and 42% of the agriculture GDP. However, Kenya is estimated to have an annual beef deficit of 300 metric tons, that is equivalent to 1.5 million cattle weighing 400 kilograms each, according to a study released in April this year by the Kenya Markets Trust, KMT. An average Kenyan consumes 17 kilograms of meat per year from all variety of meat excluding camel. This is a 3% increase from 14% per person per year recorded in 2013 by FAO. This high demand for meat by Kenyans, especially in urban centers, is what's propelling cattle rustling mainly in northern and central Rift Valley. That's what we call rustler's paradise.
This is NTV.
Molfix breathable surface developed with Airsoft technology is very soft and provides the best Molfix skincare.
I've found the best diaper for my baby's sensitive skin.
All babies deserve a high-quality diaper. You should also try Molfix.
Tusonge mbele na Fiber Mobile. Get a fiber SIM card today and enjoy Tusonge mbele bundles at affordable prices.
Buda, unakaa fresh kama umeukambani jo.
Ever since Brayo Alanduku umekuwa desperate. Kama umerudia wizi, itabidi basi umeachana na sera.
Create a present.
3 days ago, I was robbed this watch.
Imeandikwa PB inamaanisha nini?
Paris Baraza.
You are mine, and that will never change. Never.
Living in a trap house.
You need to chill. So, I have classes. Unlike the two of you, I value being with a clear mind in campus.
He leaves or this meeting is over.
Kama kuna mtu hawezi toka hii mkutano ni mimi. Mimi mikutano ndio sitokangi.
Bro, itabaki umetoka.
It's like the world revolves around you. But me, oh no, Tasha, siko ready, excuses all the time.
Wewe msee sasa una roll, uko top level hapa msee.
So niongeze ka confidence.
Ongeza confidence, enda pale, cheza kama wewe.
Who's your zazi? Yam your zazi.
Why would you work so hard to get 70,000 a month? Has money become a problem for you nowadays? See, that's what happens when you date broke guys.
Ndio sababu nilihama huku ghetto. I'll handle this myself.
I'll handle this myself.
You think you can box him like some kind of big dog? Bring it. Woof.
Ow, ow, ow! Ow, ow, ow! Ow, ow!
Living in a trap house.
Moving is crucial for healthy living.
Let's move, let's move, let's move. We don't stop.
So let's move. Register for the Diamond 10K Nairobi Run. And let's run together on the 5th of April. You can win one of the many cash prizes or diamonds. Come on guys, let's move.
We don't
Welcome to Press Pass.
Naangalia TV ninaona habari zangu.
Napata news updates kutoka Google.
Sana sana online inakuwa sawa sawa.
Are we ready to transfer that audience?
People don't really trust social media. They will always go back to the traditional media sources.
The bashing of the media has become fashionable.
I was chased from the field because of politics. He says, wapi mtu ya gazeti, a nation. I innocently lift my hand. And Aliga Parocho, he threw the room at me.
I am Mark Masai, the bald, shiny man who brings you Press Pass every week.
Press Pass. Accountability to the Fourth Estate. This is NTV.